making it the go-to spot for a warm meal and good coffee. 40 years later, it remained a beloved place for travelers and locals in Rochester, New York. One of the locals took his usual seat at the counter, a place he had used for the past 7 years. He didn't come every day due to work that kept him on the move. He often wondered how this seat was always available when he did stop by for breakfast or dinner, and he appreciated whatever luck made it possible. "Good morning, Hal," a gray-haired waitress greeted him, holding a pot of coffee. "Morning, Eve," he replied with a smile. Eve placed the mug in front of him and poured while watching his face. After years of serving, she knew just when to stop pouring without looking at the cup. "Are you okay, hun?" she asked gently. Hal let out a small snort and looked up again. Eve's insight was sharp. He nodded once, and she understood he wasn't ready to talk more. "Usual?" she asked. He nodded again, and off she went to prepare his meal. Eve didn't need to write anything down. She remembered the orders of all her regulars. He admired her remarkable memory. A sudden, painful thought flickered through his mind, but faded quickly. He focused on his coffee, gripping the mug tightly like a lifeline. Trying to escape his thoughts, he allowed himself to pay attention to the sounds around him. This was a skill he had developed to stay alert and now helped him stay calm. The diner was filled with the sounds of utensils clinking on plates, mugs thumping on tables, and a blend of conversations, some soft whispers and others loud and energetic. Everything felt normal, and he found comfort in that. But then there was a noise, subtle but present. It was quieter than the usual sounds, almost hiding. It had a higher pitch than the clatter of spoons in coffee. It was a faint tapping, like trembling. It came from a mug, the sound of anxiety. That noise didn't have a place here, and he wished he didn't have to hear it. Not today, of all days. He made a mistake by looking toward the sound and saw where it was coming from. He quickly looked away, upset with himself, but it was too late. She was sitting 2 stools to his left, and he quickly took note of her. She was tall, maybe as tall as he was. She had a slim figure with long arms and fingers wrapped around her coffee mug. Her hands were shaking, and he realized the tapping noise was from her multiple silver rings. She had long blonde hair, which looked like a thick braid. Wow, that was a lot of hair. Her big brown eyes had long eyelashes. When she glanced his way, he noticed the pain and fear in them. Her makeup was messy from crying, and there were fading bruises on her skin. She had slightly prominent teeth that braces hadn't fixed. Her lips looked soft, except the top one was healing from a split, probably caused by something hard. Her nose was a bit larger than usual, but it suited her big eyes and smile. While she wasn't what some might call traditionally beautiful, her face had a unique charm that was appealing in its own way. Definitely appealing, except her body language screamed that she was in trouble. She seemed like she would attract trouble, and judging by the bruises, it looked like that had already happened. He wondered if she was trying to escape. It seemed possible. She looked to be in her early 30s, almost 10 years younger than he was, and he thought about whether her current situation was new or something she had faced for a long time. She wore tight light blue jeans with rips and worn black shoes that had seen better days. The pink satin jacket barely covered her waist and was worn open. He noticed it didn't seem to fit properly. He heard a man behind him talking about her. He wasn't the only one noticing what was happening. The difference was he wasn't looking for trouble. Eve came over with his food, and he felt relieved for the distraction. He smiled at her, and she looked at him knowingly. He simply shook his head, thanked her, and began to eat. Eve walked over to the woman. "Are you sure you don't want anything to eat?" "No, thank you, just more coffee, please." His hand paused as her deep voice sent chills down his spine. He hadn't expected that. It sounded rougher than he would have thought, almost surprising given her appearance. Still, there was a note of fear in it that troubled him, so he tried to forget it and finished his breakfast. When he was done, Eve was there to take his plate and pour him more coffee. "Will I see you again tomorrow?" she asked. "No, not for a week or so." "Going for a long drive," Hal said. "Another work trip?" "They really wear you out," she replied, making him smile at how much she cared. "No, this is different. I'm driving west to LA. It's personal," he said, feeling a little awkward. "You can't drive all that way. You'll fly from Buffalo, right?" Eve asked in surprise. "No, I'm driving. I need the time to think." Hal said, pushing away thoughts that crowded his mind. Could I get a ride? Just to Erie? I have a sister in Pittsburgh. I can take a bus from there, she said. Her voice was filled with urgency, and though it was soft and gentle, he could see she was trying hard not to cry. She had turned around, and he noticed the way she was leaning forward a bit. Hal sensed she was trying to influence his choice. Today was not the day for him to feel like a hero, not when he was battling his own inner struggles. He wasn't in a good place to protect her. He turned his gaze down and focused on his coffee. No. I can take you to Erie, a voice came from behind Hal. It was a man, probably a long-haul trucker who had been making unkind comments about the woman. Hal knew she shouldn't trust him. He felt the blonde woman's eyes on him as well as Eve's. He kept his hands on his mug and his eyes down as troubling thoughts filled his head. Sure. Thanks, she said. Hal felt her decision hit him like a blow, and anger surged within him. This wasn't his problem. She wasn't his responsibility. He hadn't done anything wrong. Pain shot through him again. I just need to use the restroom, she said. Sure, my truck is parked right behind the restaurant. You can't miss it, the trucker said, walking away, leaving Hal uneasy. Hal took deep breaths, trying to calm himself. He sipped his coffee and pushed away his worries, focusing on the sounds around him to ground himself. Then he picked up another conversation from a distance. Pete, where are you? Good. Meet me at the rest stop just east of Buffalo. I found another girl. Yeah, we'll do the same as last time. The voice faded away as the trucker hurried to get ready. Hal felt alarmed. He knew he should have stopped this. Seeing the fear and trembling in her made it clear this wasn't her first wrong turn. In frustration, his mug shattered in his grip, splattering coffee everywhere. Eve rushed over to clean up the mess, carefully gathering the pieces of the mug while watching him with concern. Sorry about that, he said. Put it on my tab, he sighed. Eve nodded and started to leave. Before he could stop himself, he reached out and touched her arm. You need to stop her from going with him. Eve raised her eyebrows but stayed quiet. He took a deep breath. He called his friend. He took another breath to keep his anger under control. They're planning to harm her at the next rest stop. Eve gasped, lifting her hand to her mouth. Then she met his gaze. Hal, she needs to get to Erie safely. He blinked in confusion. Yes, that's why you need to tell her not to. You need to take her, Eve insisted. Her tone left no room for debate. He opened his mouth to argue, but her look reminded him of a mother dealing with a stubborn child. She was very good at this, but she didn't know what kind of trouble he was facing. She had no idea how dangerous it was. Eve hurried away, and Hal watched as she caught the woman just before she left the building. He noticed the woman had only a small pink backpack. The two leaned in close as Eve spoke softly. Hal saw the woman pull back, then begin to cry. Eve put her arm around her and led her back toward Hal, whose stomach tightened as they approached. When they stood in front of him, he managed to look into the woman's tear-filled eyes. Erie? He asked, and she nodded slightly. Once again, a victim in need. Okay, I'll get you there, he said firmly. Eve smiled at him kindly as she let go of the woman. Her name is Sam. Sam, this is Hal. They exchanged brief nods. He placed some money on the counter and looked at the waitress. When I return from L.A., I want a slice of blueberry pie. She patted his arm with a smile. Sure thing. Stealing a glance at the woman, Sam, he moved toward the door, holding it open for her. She followed closely behind as if worried he would leave without her. Outside, he led her to his rental car. As he traveled across the country, he had treated himself to a slightly nicer vehicle. It was bigger and more comfortable than what he usually chose, and even had GPS to guide him along the way. He opened the door for Sam, feeling a bit foolish for falling back into his old habits. She looked at him in surprise before quickly getting inside. He closed her door and walked around to his side. Glancing back at the diner, he saw Eve watching him with a small smile. Frustration crossed his face as he got into the car. He used his phone to find the address for the Erie bus station and entered it into the GPS. They soon hit the highway, driving west. A heavy silence filled the car, each lost in their own thoughts. After a while, they passed the rest stop where trouble was planned. Hal heard Sam start to cry again, but tried his best to ignore it. They bypassed Buffalo, but on the outskirts, he pulled off the highway, aware of Sam's discomfort. He drove into the parking lot of a McDonald's and turned off the engine. She glanced at him, looking a bit anxious. "You've been fidgeting for the last 15 miles. If you need a break, just let me know. Please go to the washroom inside." She nodded in relief, but shot him another worried look. "Your stomach has been making noises since we left the diner. I'll go get you something to eat. What do you want?" She wanted to argue, but her stomach growled loudly. She smiled shyly. "An Egg McMuffin?" He nodded and opened his door. Sam hurried out too. He locked the car and then held the door open for her. She smiled at his kindness and hurried inside. He ordered 3 breakfast sandwiches for her and picked up a few bottles of water for the car. Hal noticed a teenage girl rushing to the door with a backpack that looked familiar. The strap had a similar tear to Sam's bag. This was something he felt ready to handle. He took 2 steps forward and grabbed the bag, pulling it from her hands. "Hey, give that back!" she shouted, clearly upset. He stood quietly, looking at her. "I said, give me my bag, jerk!" Her voice rose, trying to scare him. "What's happening here?" A deep voice came from behind Hal. "This guy is stealing my bag!" the young girl yelled, frustrated that her shouting wasn't working. The manager stepped between Hal and the girl. "Is that true? Did you take her bag?" "No!" "He's lying! Give me my bag!" she shouted. Sam suddenly came rushing from the back of the restaurant, looking anxious. Hal turned to the manager. "The bag belongs to her. She was in the restroom when this girl took it." "No way!" the girl yelled as she moved away from the manager and ran out the door. The manager tried to catch her, but she was too quick. She darted around the corner and vanished. Sam's lip trembled again as Hal handed her the backpack. He grabbed his things from the table and started heading outside with Sam close behind him. This time, he let her open her own door, and she quickly climbed in. "Did you do what you needed to?" he asked, and she nodded. "How did she get the bag?" "It was hanging on the hook inside the stall. I sat down and started. Then she reached over and grabbed it. She also messed with the lock. It was hard for me to get out." She looked up at him with big, sad eyes. "Thank you for getting it back." He nodded. "Lesson learned. Now, eat your breakfast." He handed her the bag after taking out the water bottles. He noticed there were no napkins in the bag. "You can find napkins in the glove box." "Please try not to drop any food," she said quietly. Hal got them back on the interstate, and they joined the busy traffic on 90, heading west alongside Lake Erie. Sam took the chance to eat quickly. She slowed down with her third bite, leaning back against the seat, looking a bit more at ease. "Oh my gosh, thank you. I haven't eaten in days," she said, sounding relieved. Hal felt a bit better too. It felt nice to care for someone else. She was certainly a welcome distraction. Maybe that was a good thing. "You're welcome," he replied. He glanced over and saw that she was looking at him. He raised an eyebrow and focused back on the road. "What's on your mind?" "You aren't what I thought you would be." He looked at her again and noticed she was studying him closely. "What made you think about expectations? We just met." He felt a twinge of guilt, knowing he had done the same when he first saw her. So far, she matched his impression. She seemed taken aback by the question. "People. We often judge each other at first sight. It's just how we are," she explained. "What did you think?" he asked, curious despite himself. She paused, and then the words rushed out. "Your clothes are a bit wrinkled, like you've been wearing them for a while, and you haven't shaved in a couple of days. I thought maybe you were one of those people who blend in, the ones nobody notices. But now you seem really confident, especially at the restaurant. I wish I had that." He frowned. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you," she said urgently. He shook his head. "It's okay, I'm not offended." He stopped for a moment. "I've had a rough time these past few days. I'm not the best company. That's part of why I'm driving across the country. Just me and my thoughts." She fell quiet for a moment, studying his face. "Is that why you said no?" she asked softly. He made a quiet sound. Saying no had not gone well for him. "Yes, I'm sorry for prying, but I'm glad you helped me escape those bad people." He nodded, though he knew she didn't realize how close she was to danger herself. They traveled on in silence. The scenery was plain, as the interstate was built for speed, not beauty. How long have you been on the run? The question slipped out before he could stop it. Maybe it was the looming danger that made him lose his filter. She froze, glancing at him and then looking away. What makes you think? Bruises on your face, your lip, the marks on your wrist, not eating for days, your actions in the diner, he noticed, then stopped as he saw her getting upset. It's okay. I'm not judging you, He was observant, and he often found it hard to hold back his thoughts. Sorry, he added softly. They traveled in silence for a bit until she spoke quietly. 2 days. Frank hurt me. Again. I couldn't stay, so I left when he went out to the club. Club? Hal asked gently. The Kitty Club. It's a place he manages. I used to work there. Is Frank looking for you? Her scared eyes turned to him. Probably, yes. Does he think he owns you, or do you owe him something? Hal asked calmly, but inside he felt a sense of danger rising. Both. She sniffed, but seemed to regain her composure. He said I was too old for the stage and not attractive enough to work in the bar. He told me I needed to change my appearance. She pointed at her enhancements. He paid for them. Did he say how much they cost? Hal was starting to understand how Frank thought. It looked like she was still under his control. He wouldn't tell me, she said, her voice shaking. I see. Does Frank know where your sister lives? Hal asked. He worried Sam might be bringing this troublemaker closer to her sister. Sam shook her head. I haven't talked to Delilah in 15 years. I know she got married, moved to Pittsburgh, and has 2 kids. My younger brother Jimmy gave me her info a few years ago when he was looking for me. Jimmy passed away in a motorcycle accident that summer. Hal wondered if Frank was involved in that, but kept his thoughts to himself. He needed to stay removed from this. He was just a way for Sam to get to Erie. Once there, they would part, and she would take a bus to her sister. He stopped himself from thinking about her life beyond that. While he had seen her make some choices and had heard about others from her past, this was her life, and he had his own problems to figure out. Why are you going to L.A.? Her question surprised him. He felt tense and focused on his breathing until he relaxed. When he could move again, he noticed her watching him anxiously. He didn't want to add to her worries. Sorry. You don't have to tell me, she said quickly. No, it's personal. Another long stretch of silence passed. Hal felt like he had let her down. Are you going to be okay? Her sudden question struck him, making him pause. This person who had faced so much was worried about him? He almost wanted to laugh, but then he realized it would be wrong to laugh at her caring nature. Another sign of the darkness inside him. He could tell her everything was fine, but he decided against it. Time for honesty, then. I don't know. I'll just wait and see. That's why I'm taking a week to get there. I need the time. He took another quick look and noticed some of the lost trust was coming back. His honest reply seemed to help. You know what I did? What about you? Her innocent questions felt sharp, as if they were opening old wounds. He decided to give the safe answer. I'm an inventory control manager for an office equipment company. He glanced over and she smiled. It was the first time he had seen her smile like that, and it made him feel warm inside. He couldn't help but smile back. Still, he wondered what made her smile. What's that for? She shook her head, the smile spreading wider. He felt a little tug in his chest. Seriously, what's up? Hal asked, returning her smile. She seemed to think for a moment. Your job just doesn't seem to fit you. His eyebrows shot up. Why's that? She looked at him closely, trying to see inside. I don't know. It's like you should be doing something bigger. Bigger? He laughed. I mean something more important, less boring, she said, shaking her head. Hal smiled to himself. Don't dismiss boring, I like it. She giggled, and her laugh was nice, though it had an edge of nervousness to it. I don't see it, she said, studying him. Maybe something like a fireman or a police officer or something military. He met her gaze. Military? She looked away, a bit shy. I'm not sure what exactly. I'm not great at explaining things. I'll say it again. Don't dismiss boring. Not everyone can deal with fast-paced jobs. A little calm is nice sometimes. She nodded, but he could tell she wasn't fully convinced. He caught her frowning slightly. What's wrong? I see a ring. Are you married? Her question cut deep again. He had to work to keep his expression steady. He nodded quietly. What does she do? He took a breath and released it slowly. She's a dental hygienist. Ugh, looking into people's mouths all day, she said, wrinkling her nose. He nodded, wishing she would change the topic. Unaware of his discomfort, she kept going. Why isn't she here with you? He felt a weight in his chest. Busy, he finally managed to say. She noticed his tense jaw and the pain in his eyes. Her expression shifted. Oh, I'm really sorry. He looked at her and saw she understood. That felt even worse than her not knowing. Don't. I didn't mean to pry. Please don't! Hal fought to keep his breathing steady. He needed to get away from this woman before she realized the trouble she was in. He saw a road sign for Erie, Pennsylvania, and felt a spark of hope. Just 3 more miles, and he could exit the interstate. He would take her to the bus station, and then he could go on his own. That felt safer. As they got closer to the exit, he noticed the sadness on her face, and her fear came back. You don't have money for a bus ticket, do you? She looked at him with big, sad eyes. Sam's bottom lip quivered as she shook her head. Great. You should call your sister before you just show up at her place. Her fear grew, but she nodded. He left the interstate and followed the GPS through the city, heading north toward the lake. The Greyhound bus station was near the piers. Hal kept an eye on her and saw that she was getting more anxious as they neared the station. Finally, they arrived at the parking lot by the buses. He turned off the car and glanced at Sam. She was trying to hold it together, and he respected that. He got out, and after a moment, she followed him. I'll pay for your ticket, but you need to call your sister first, he said firmly as he locked the car. She looked at him and nodded. They walked together across the lot to the bus station and went inside, finding very few people around. There were no payphones, but they found a bench near the ticket booth and sat down. Do you have a cell? Another lost look. So, no. Okay, use mine. I'll check on the bus, he said, handing her his phone. She took a little red notebook from her bag and opened it to the page with her sister's number. Hal stood up and walked over to the ticket agent. Hi, one way to Pittsburgh, please? The man glanced at his screen. The bus to Pittsburgh will arrive in 30 minutes. It costs $36. Hal returned to Sam, who was on the phone. Hello? Delilah? It's me, Sam, Samantha, your sister. There was a long silence. Please don't say that. Another pause. I wanted to come see you. Today. Sam started to sniffle. Please don't be like that, Deli. I'm really not. Oh, no, please. Oh. Sam looked at the phone, then slowly curled up on the bench as tears began to flow. She cried deeply as Hal watched, feeling a sense of sadness wash over him. He realized there wouldn't be a happy reunion with her sister, a result of choices made long ago. He walked back to Sam, sat down next to her, gently took his phone back, and rubbed her back to help her feel calm. A memory flashed into his mind. Lisa, crying into her pillow. He sat on the edge of their bed, comforting her. He couldn't remember why he was crying, but he felt a wave of guilt that made him think it was his fault. He wasn't sure if he should believe that feeling. Now, he wondered if those tears had anything to do with what had happened. His mind was racing, thinking about every small gesture and word, searching for the truth in everything. Finally, a bus arrived at the station, announcing the 12:40 to Pittsburgh. They both remained still on the bench. As the bus drove away, Hal heard a soft sigh from the woman whose head had rested on his leg while he remembered the past. He looked down and realized he was gently running his fingers through her hair. She seemed more at ease now. What was he going to do next? He was meant to go to the West Coast. She didn't belong in that chaos. He didn't want her to get caught up in it. At the same time, he couldn't just send her away. It felt like she had faced enough hardships recently. He might be troubled, but he didn't want to be unkind. He had to keep moving west. He couldn't decide for her, but he was running out of options. He glanced down at her and noticed her eyes were closed. What? What are you going to do now? He managed to ask, his throat tight. She shook her head and pressed her head against his leg, shivering slightly. He turned his face away and looked out the window to avoid seeing her face. He could just leave. He'd kept his promise to Eve. Safe. There was a trailer with a sign that read Queen's Pork Sausages attached to an old red truck. He had seen the potential threat's truck before, and now he recognized it across the street. That made it clear he couldn't leave Sam behind. They were likely watching them. "Sam, we need to go, right now." She looked at him confused, then froze at the serious look in his eyes. "Come on." He helped her stand up, handed her backpack to her, and urged her to move. "What's happening? Where are we going?" Her voice was filled with real fear. "The person from Pinky's followed us. We need to get to my car." Hal was on high alert, noticing movement in the parking lot. Left and right, it seemed they were getting closer. So he brought his friend along. The tension inside him grew. They parked in the second row of cars and needed to get past the first row. Their pursuers would likely try to catch them as they stepped out from between the vehicles. He carefully changed their path so they could pass between a parked delivery truck and a Jeep. As they reached the back of the Jeep, he gently nudged Sam into the narrow space. "Keep going," he whispered. She took a few steps and looked back. He was gone. She moved forward a bit more, but then something grabbed her wrist tightly, pulling her hard. She stumbled in fear. She yelled as she fell against the side of the Jeep. Frightened, she held onto the heavy metal railing to stop her attackers from getting to her. Behind her, she heard a quick series of loud sounds and strange noises. Something fell to the ground, followed by heavy thuds. She kept her eyes shut tight as sparks flew around. Then a calm voice spoke near her ear. "Sam, it's okay. We need to go now. Come on." Gentle hands helped her up and gather her things. She looked down in fear at the two men lying on the ground. "Let's hurry." Sam held onto Hal's arm as he led her to the passenger side door. When the door closed behind her, she felt a wave of safety wash over her. She turned around in her seat to see the two men still face down. As Hal got into the driver's seat, she stared at him wide-eyed. He was talking to someone on his phone. "Thanks." He hung up and tossed a stun gun into the space between the seats. He caught her glance. "I took this from the truck driver. It was meant to help them." He quickly started the car and drove out of the lot slowly. He tapped on the GPS a few times, and then they were on their way. He didn't say anything until they were back on the freeway. He turned to Sam and saw her watching him. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yes, but what did you do?" He looked away, his face tense. "I know how to defend myself." He then asked, "So, going to your sister's is off the table?" She looked like she might cry again, but she nodded. "Do you have a backup plan?" he asked. She shook her head. "No other family, cousins, or an aunt?" Her expression faded and her lip quivered, making him feel uneasy. "Where are we going?" she asked softly. "I'm headed to LA, that's all I know. Do you have a place to go?" She shook her head. Her sad eyes locked onto his, filled with pain. He thought to himself how he didn't want her to come along to LA. It wouldn't be safe for her, and he needed time to figure things out on his own. She began to cry again. "Why are you crying now?" he asked, feeling a mix of frustration and concern. "I'm scared. I don't want to depend on you, but I have no home, no money, no family. My ex-boyfriend wants to hurt me, and those men tried to take me again." She was shaking. "I'm terrified, but I feel safe with you. But you don't want me here." Her tears turned into sobs, and Hal felt overwhelmed. He had kept his anger in check earlier, but her crying was making those feelings rise again. He needed to stop this. "You can stay with me until we figure something out," he said firmly. "Please don't cry." Her tears slowed as she looked at him with hope. He didn't want to see that, so he focused on the road ahead. The crying stopped, and they continued driving through the countryside. "Where are we headed tonight?" she asked softly. He nodded. "I got a room in a motel in Columbus, Ohio. I'll get another room when we arrive." Hal glanced over and noticed the worry on her face. "What's the matter?" "I don't want to be a bother." He sighed. "What do you mean?" "I only brought what I was wearing." She looked at him with wide eyes. "I'm not ready for a week-long trip." Hal looked at her again and took a deep breath to calm himself. Finally, he nodded. "All right, we can stop and get some things for you." Seeing her worried expression, he added, "I have a travel budget." Her eyes shone with unshed tears, but she held them back. "Thank you." He nodded back, and they resumed their quiet drive. It would take nearly 4 hours to reach Columbus, so they settled into the comfortable seats. After some time, Hal felt her gaze on him again. He glanced over carefully, but she just looked very curious. "What?" he asked, unsure if he wanted to know. I didn't see it, but your fight with those two, it didn't sound like any fight I've ever heard. It was so quiet. He raised an eyebrow in surprise. You've heard a lot of fights? She nodded seriously. Frank and his friends, the bouncers, they often get into fights. Sometimes people drink too much and cross lines. They take them outside and we can hear it in the dressing room. I think they do it to scare the girls. She looked down at her chipped nails, pain showing in her eyes. Sometimes they do it just for fun. Take someone outside and rough them up. Sometimes it's one of us. Me. She shook herself, then met his gaze again. Fights are always loud people screaming, begging, crying, swearing, and skin hitting skin. Always. She looked at him again. But your fight was silent and it ended so quickly. I don't like to fight. Liar, the dark voice teased, but only Hal heard it. He took a deep breath. Hit hard to stop the fight fast. Walk away. He felt the dark voice's cold scorn at his words. It was only satisfied when someone was defeated. Inventory control manager, she murmured quietly. He stayed silent. It felt safer that way. Hal joined the busy traffic on the highway around western Columbus. They had made good time, even with a few stops for Sam. The first time they stopped, he stayed in the car, and Sam was visibly anxious when she returned. For the next stops, he went inside with her and waited. This seemed to calm her worries about being left alone. At one stop, he called ahead to the next motel he had booked and got a room right next to his. After a while, Sam finally fell asleep, and he noticed how peaceful she looked. He saw his exit and left the highway to enter a neighborhood. He spotted the motel, but realized they had some errands to do first. First, though, they needed dinner. Sam, it's time to wake up. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing her big brown eyes. Are we at the motel? I thought we'd have dinner first, he said, and her face lit up. He pointed to the GPS screen. There are many restaurants around here. Choose one. Her eyes widened, and he felt that maybe she had never been asked to pick before. He nodded, encouraging her to look closer at the screen. They have an Olive Garden, she exclaimed excitedly. He glanced at her and then at the map where she pointed. Is that what you want? Her smile turned a bit unsure. You don't like it? It's great, I like it, he assured her. Olive Garden it is. Her smile returned, even brighter. He found it hard to look away from her happiness. He drove to the parking lot and found a spot close to the entrance. Once out of the car, they stretched and laughed at their shared groans. He locked the car and they walked inside. The hostess at the front desk looked at Sam's outfit and smirked. The tall blonde moved a bit closer to him. He stepped forward and held the young woman's gaze. She seemed ready to ignore him because of his casual clothes, but the manager arrived and noticed Hal's annoyed expression. He leaned in so Hal could whisper to him. The manager raised his eyebrows and then quickly moved the young woman aside to lead Hal and Sam to a nice table for four off to the side. Hal sat with his back to the wall, and he had Sam sit to his left to keep his view clear. Your waitress will be here soon, the manager said with a friendly smile. When they were alone, Sam leaned in closer. What did you tell him? She asked quietly. He shrugged. The hostess was going to make it difficult for us to get a table, so I said I was a federal marshal and you were in witness protection and we didn't need any delays. She started to giggle, then looked at him with wide eyes. It's true! You could be a marshal! But then she suddenly froze. Are you a marshal? She whispered in surprise. He grinned and shook his head. They looked at the menu and placed their orders as the busy waitress came over. When the food arrived, Hal thought it was okay, but he found more joy in watching Sam enjoy her meal. When she finally settled back and rested her hands on her small belly, she looked relaxed. Feeling full? He asked, and she nodded with a sleepy smile. Don't fall asleep. We need to do some shopping, he urged. She pouted but then noticed two men coming toward them. A look of fear crossed her face, and she squeezed Hal's hand, making him look to see what worried her. Wow! I can't believe it's you! Rapunzel, what a surprise to see you here! A heavy man shouted as he got closer. The thin man beside him kept his gaze on Hal. The loud one looked around. Where's Frank? Hal glanced at Sam, but she was frozen, so he answered for her. She's not with Frank anymore. The man's sharp eyes shifted to Hal. That can't be right. Mr. Capello doesn't let anyone go, especially not Goldilocks here. Who are you? I'm her friend, and you? The heavy man grunted. I run the Kitty Club just south of 70. I've known Rapunzel since her stage days when she used to perform. I don't think she wants to remember those times, Hal said firmly, cutting off the man whose smile faded. The man sized up Hal, and his smirk returned. You don't seem very friendly. Hal suppressed a laugh. The man had no clue. You could say that. Enjoy your evening. The heavy man nodded to himself and then to his partner before fixing his gaze on Sam. See you later, Goldilocks. Once they were alone, the waitress rushed over and Hal paid the bill. He noticed Sam was trembling after their encounter. He needed to distract her or risk her getting upset again. Come on, let's go shopping. She stood and he wrapped his arm around her back for support. She looked at him in surprise but held on to his hand until they reached the door. He guided her to his car, then drove to the supercenter and parked. We can find the essentials here, everything you need, he said as he got out. She nodded and hurried to keep up with him, linking her arm with his. She glanced back one more time. Once inside, Hal took a shopping cart and led her to the women's clothing section, steering her past a rack of discount-to-shirts where she paused. Please see this as a chance to refresh your wardrobe. You don't have to stick to the shirts. Don't worry about the prices. If it looks nice and fits, we'll buy it, he said. She looked up at him with wide eyes. We need enough outfits for a week. She started to pick things out cautiously. Each time she found a blouse she liked, she would turn to Hal for approval. He would nod. He only shook his head once, deciding a particular choice didn't suit her. She took the clothes to the fitting room while he stood by their cart, watching over their things. When she came back with just 3 blouses, he raised an eyebrow. The others didn't fit, she said, noticing a frown from a nearby sales clerk. Let's find some more, he replied. Sam grinned as the 3 blouses went into the cart. While she was looking, he found a few items for himself in the men's section across the aisle. He picked out a pack of Blackish shirts, a pack of comfortable underwear, and a pair of gray running pants. All of it went into the cart. For the next hour, Sam tried on clothes until they had enough outfits for at least 8 days. Along with the blouses, she found 3 dresses that she seemed especially excited about. He made her choose jeans that were more whole, but she insisted on getting 3 pairs of yoga pants, which were a bit more fitting. As she modeled many of the outfits for him, he realized how great she looked. His first impression of her didn't show how long and fit her legs were or how nice her figure was overall. He noticed these things and found himself thinking about someone else, which put him in a slight bad mood. To lift his spirits, he led her to the undergarment section. He looked her in the eyes. Just get things that fit and feel good. The bras I need can be really expensive, she started, but stopped when he frowned. He held up a hand and rubbed his face. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to act like that. I just have a lot on my mind. Don't worry about the cost. If it fits well, it's worth it. Surprised, she smiled and walked off happily to look. He wondered where those words had come from. He wasn't usually charming like that. She returned with an armful of bras and underwear, and they went into the cart. She noticed he seemed a bit distracted but didn't ask. As they passed the shoe section, he stopped. You need some sandals for the dresses and definitely new running shoes. Her face lit up, and she quickly searched for sandals. He noticed a nice pair of women's running shoes, white with pink details. They were a bit costly, but they looked comfortable compared to her worn-out shoes. He also grabbed a pack of ankle socks. The shoes and socks went into his cart. When he found her sitting on a bench looking at her feet with a sad expression, he asked, What's wrong? I can't wear sandals looking like this, she replied, her voice shaky. He pulled out his phone and found a nail salon nearby. Let's finish up. You can get your nails done at a place in the next shopping area. Her eyes widened as she looked at him in surprise. Why are you being so nice to me? Hal thought for a moment. Helping Sam was making him feel good too. You don't know exactly. It's good for me too. She put on her worn-out shoes and stood up. She grabbed 2 pairs of sandals and smiled at him. Thank you. He nodded and they continued walking. They stopped in front of the luggage aisle and she looked at him with confusion. Did you think I would make you carry your clothes in plastic bags? You need a suitcase, choose one. A medium-sized hard shell is good. Looking around, her eyes landed on a bright pink suitcase nearby. She walked over and touched it gently. Looking back at him, she said, I've never had a suitcase before. I've never gone anywhere far enough to need one. This is the farthest I've been from home. Hal left the cart and took the suitcase to check it out. It passed his inspection, so he put it back in the cart underneath. He picked up a pink makeup kit for the cosmetics they would get next. "What's that?" Sam asked as he added the small bag to the cart. "Makeup kit. We will go there next." He pushed the cart forward and she hurried to keep up. He made sure to get her moisturizer, deodorant, the cosmetics she liked, some brushes and combs, a toothbrush, and toothpaste. He also bought her big bottles of shampoo and conditioner for her long hair. By the time they checked out, the cart was quite full. Sam worried about the cost until Hal had enough of her fretting. Not wanting to snap at her, he simply gave her a hug. They were both surprised by it. He found it amusing that she was actually a little taller than his 5'9". When he pulled back, she smiled shyly. They took their things to the car and he opened the trunk. She noticed he already had 2 black suitcases inside. He added her pink suitcase, opened it, and quickly packed their purchases inside. There was only a little room left when he finished. "Oh no, we forgot to get you sleepwear," he exclaimed. "I don't wear clothes when I sleep," she admitted. He glanced at her, then took one of the black shirts he had bought and tossed it into her suitcase before closing it. "You should have something just in case you need to get up quickly." She nodded in agreement. They drove to the nail salon, and he followed her inside. He found a place to sit and wait while a friendly woman guided her to the pedicure area. Seeing Sam was being cared for, Hal leaned back in his chair and relaxed. He took a quick nap until he heard Sam and the nail technician coming back. When he opened his eyes, he saw a big smile on Sam's face. She was wearing flip-flop sandals to let the nail polish on her toes dry, and he noticed her favorite bright pink color. She had her old sneakers with her, so he took them and tossed them in a nearby trash can. Sam held out her hand, and he admired the polish on her nails. It started as a soft pink and faded into white at the tips. They were her real nails, only a little longer than her fingertips. He told her they looked great, and she beamed with happiness. Hal paid for their visit and gave the young woman a nice tip for making Sam so joyful. They headed back to the car, and Hal drove them to the motel, which was close to the shops. Once inside, Hal got the key cards for their rooms, which were next to each other on the ground floor. He parked in front of one of the rooms. "This is mine, and you get the other one," he said. She looked at him and replied softly, "We don't have to be in separate rooms." "Yes, we do," he said with a deep breath. "I don't sleep well these days. It's better for you to have your own room." She studied him for a moment and then nodded. He grabbed their suitcases as she opened her door. With a gentle push, he rolled hers over to her. She smiled and caught the handle to bring it into her room before closing the door. He opened his door and brought his suitcase inside. Then he knocked on her door. "Who is it?" "It's Hal," he answered with a smile. She was doing well. She opened the door and, seeing his smile, returned it with one of her own. "If you need anything tonight, just tap on the wall between our rooms 3 times. I don't sleep very deeply. I want us to leave by 9 a.m. tomorrow, so let's try to be out of the motel by 7:45 a.m. for breakfast. After that, we can come back, brush our teeth, load the car, and head out. Does that sound good?" She nodded, and he continued. "If you're up for it, you can watch a movie." But she shook her head. "Thank you. I'm going to take a long, hot shower and wash my hair." "That will be enough for tonight," she replied. He smiled, noticing her long braid. "All right, lock up and I'll see you in the morning." She smiled and closed the door. He heard her secure the lock, and feeling satisfied, he went into his room and locked up behind him. He changed out of his wrinkled clothes and frowned, realizing that in his hurry to leave home, he had only packed a few shirts and pants. All he had were the shirts, undergarments, and running pants he just bought. His suitcase had his boots and socks, so he planned to wear those instead of loafers tomorrow. He set aside fresh clothes for the morning, then neatly packed away the ones he'd worn that day. Alone, he went through his usual exercises, a mix of stretches to keep his muscles flexible and strong. This routine helped him stay focused, clearing away the thoughts and worries that had built up throughout the day. Usually, this workout left him feeling refreshed, but tonight, he struggled to find that same calm. Recent events, especially involving Lisa, left him feeling unsettled. He hoped he could relax enough to find sleep when he went to bed, After an hour, though, he realized tonight would be different. The calm he usually found wasn't coming. He thought back to an incident in a parking lot in Erie, where he'd confronted two men teaching them a lesson. They wouldn't bother anyone again, and he'd made sure their injuries were lasting. But he felt restless, the memory still vivid in his mind. Switching to push-ups and sit-ups, he kept going until he felt the burn in his muscles. Then he jogged in place for a while. Afterward, he went to shower, letting the hot water soothe his tired body. For a moment, his mind wandered. He thought of Sam, imagining how much effort it must take for her to wash her long hair. He quickly pushed the image away, and instead, memories of Lisa surfaced. Lisa had always been bold and unpredictable, pushing limits and bringing chaos. He remembered times with her, times that left him both thrilled and uneasy. As he finished his shower, he reminded himself that those memories were in the past. The present was what mattered, and he knew he had to keep his focus there. She was gasping and struggling, her breaths short and shaky. Hal was jolted back to himself, realizing she was barely holding on. He quickly loosened his grip, allowing her to catch her breath. Gently, he helped her sit on the bench in the shower. "You always hesitate," she muttered, disappointment in her eyes. The memory left Hal feeling unsettled, so he pushed it away, focusing instead on the simple act of washing up, even if the mental weight remained. The sound of a keycard beep jolted Hal to alertness. His instincts took over, and he silently slipped off the bed, knife in hand, blending into the shadows in his dark clothes. He positioned himself against the wall near the door, ready for what was coming. The door burst open, and Hal felt time slow. The man who entered first stumbled, caught off guard by a carefully placed bedspread on the floor, and fell forward, his weapon discharging accidentally. Hal didn't waste a moment as the man lay still. As another intruder stepped through, Hal struck quickly, knocking him back and pushing him out the door. He then moved swiftly to Sam's room, where another man stood, startled. The man raised his weapon, but Hal was faster, closing the distance with a determined drive. After a quick struggle, Hal disarmed him and managed to neutralize him, staying focused and efficient as he moved forward. In the silence that followed, Hal crouched down, listening carefully. He heard the faint sound of a car speeding away, but no other threats remained. He could hear scared sounds coming from the bed. "Sam!" Hal called out, pushing the fear away. He left the knife on the floor and moved carefully to the bed. "Hal?" she said softly from under the sheets. "Yeah, it's me. Stay there for a moment. I'm just going to look around." "You're safe here." He went to the door and listened. Nothing. He stepped outside to check on the man he had knocked out. Lifting his shirt, he saw the microphone, wires, and tape he had noticed earlier. The man had meant to hurt him, but Hal still had the upper hand. The man was down and might have a mild injury. Hal went back to his room and grabbed his phone. He called his contact. "Report. I need help. Clean up. There was an attempt to hurt someone and a kidnapping. 3 people are down, 1 caught wearing a wire." "Got it. Give me the address and wait there." Hal shared the details and hung up. He returned to Sam's room and heard her crying softly. "Sam, it's okay. It's over." He sat on the edge of the bed. She pulled the sheets up to her chin and looked around for him. She gasped when she saw the 2 men on the floor. "These were the guys we met at Olive Garden, plus some others," he said. Did you hurt them?" she asked quietly. "They weren't here for a friendly visit. The thin guy rushed into my room with a weapon. He ended up injuring himself when he stumbled. Silly mistake." He pointed to the others. "These 2 were here for you. Someone got away." He noticed Sam still hiding behind the blanket. Suddenly, red and blue lights filled the doorway as the local police arrived. "Are you wearing the shirt I gave you?" he asked. She shook her head. He sighed and took off his shirt to give to her. "Put this on. The police are here and they might not be friendly, but don't worry. I made a call." He glanced at the door as she struggled to put the shirt on. "Police! Come out with your hands up!" He sighed. "Here we go?" Sam stared in shock at Hal's back. His skin was marked with past pain. She watched him stand and walk through the door lit up by the flashing lights. Now it was her turn. She felt thankful for his long shirt covering her. She tried to copy his calm movements, but she was too scared. She stepped into the lights. Hal caught up on sleep in the police holding area. There wasn't much else he could do. "Demon?" He opened his eyes and looked towards the entrance of the cell. "Demon." "Whatever. You're getting out," the officer said. Hal stood and walked over to the door, and the officer let him out. He followed the man into a large room filled with desks and a few police officers working the night shift. He realized he was just in his black shorts, and that was it. The room fell silent as everyone looked at him. At first, he felt troubled by how much people noticed the scars and burns on his skin, signs of the pain he had endured. Now, he simply ignored their curious gazes. Sam was seated with her back to him at a nearby desk, talking to a detective. She seemed to be all right for the moment. They had given her a blanket to keep warm. Not too far behind, Sam was his supervisor. Carl Gunderman was a man in his 60s but looked younger, maybe in his 40s. He was short and slim, with a thick black beard and a buzz cut. His voice sounded deep and rich over the phone, but in person he never smiled. Today was no different. He moved closer to Hal, scanning for any new injuries. "I'm fine. It was a close call, but no injuries," Hal said quietly. "Why did you do that?" Carl asked. Hal let out a soft laugh as he remembered how Eve had pushed him to take care of Sam. "I had no choice." Carl raised his eyebrows and glanced at Sam, who was unaware of their conversation. Hal nodded slightly. "Why are you off the program?" Carl asked. Hal felt a brief jolt as he thought of Lisa, and Carl frowned. They had been working together for so long that they understood each other without needing to talk. Carl sensed that Lisa was unpredictable for Hal. "I need some time, just a week," Hal said, meeting Carl's gaze. Carl finally nodded. "Can you manage without her, the troublemaker?" Carl asked, motioning toward Sam, who he had already assessed. Hal looked at Sam from behind, wondering if she felt uneasy around him after seeing what he could do. She must have sensed his stare or noticed the quietness in the room, because she turned and saw him standing there looking worn. Sam jumped to her feet, rushing over and wrapping her arms around him. She buried her face against his neck, trembling slightly. He instinctively returned the hug. Hal exchanged a surprised glance with Carl, then shook his head to respond to the earlier question. Carl frowned, his expression showing resignation. He held up a finger and silently mouthed, "1 week." Hal nodded, and his supervisor walked away without another word. "Miss Dulaine, I have a few more questions," the female officer said, and Hal felt Sam cling to him tighter. "Sam is done answering questions." The officer was clearly displeased and raised her voice. "This is an active investigation." "Stand down, Officer Haynes," came a command. The officer turned to see her supervisor frowning at her. "Sir? Orders from above, there is no case." "Destroy the paperwork." The officer looked at Hal, then nodded at her commander. "Yes, sir." She returned to her desk. "Thank you," Hal said. "Don't thank me. It wasn't my choice." He handed over a large manila envelope containing Hal's wallet, keys, and room key cards. Carl had done a great job again. Even his knife was in an evidence bag. "The guys who came in had key cards. Did you talk to the night clerk?" Hal asked. "He's gone, just like the driver. Even if we find them, there's nothing we can charge them with," the man said, looking unhappy. He glanced at Hal. "You messed up a big operation we had planned for a year, but Officer Romano wanted me to thank you for not hurting him." He frowned again. Hal just nodded. "We need to go back to the motel to get our things. Can we get a ride?" Hal asked. The commander nodded. "It's all set. You'll meet the driver at the entrance." He walked away, clearly unhappy about everything. "Let's go," Hal told Sam, who stepped back and looked confused. "We just get to leave? I don't understand. People died." She seemed lost. He couldn't explain it well. Maybe she didn't want to stay with him now. "Yes, we can leave. There are no charges. It'll probably just be called a failed robbery with the attacker's deaths as self-defense on my part. I'll understand if you want to leave me." "No!" Sam grabbed his arm. "Don't leave me behind," she whispered. "I don't want to be alone." He blinked at her, then nodded. "Okay, let's go back to the motel." They went down the stairs to the ground floor, where a man watched them with a smile. "Mr. Demon?" "Demon," he corrected. "Sorry about that. I'm here to drive you back to your motel." The man seemed a little distracted by Sam. "Let's go," Hal said, trying to get the man focused. They followed him to a minivan and sat in the middle bench seat as the driver got into place. The drive back didn't take long. Sam held Hal's arm tightly, still shaking. When the driver dropped them off at their rooms, the sun was just starting to come up. Police tape was still around the area by their doors, and 2 police cars were parked outside. Hal approached the nearest police car, and the officer inside frowned at him. "We're going inside to get our bags. Then we're leaving. Are you staying until we go?" he asked. The officer pointed to the other car. "He's guarding the site. I'm here to make sure you leave," the officer answered sharply. Hal nodded and walked over to the police tape. He carefully moved it aside and opened the doors to their rooms. Both doors were broken. He noticed a bullet hole in Sam's window, but was relieved to see the bullet had stopped near the ceiling. It could have easily gone to one of the rooms in the building across the parking lot. "Get dressed, grab your suitcase, and pack your things. Then meet me by the car. We're leaving early today, and we'll have breakfast in Springfield," he said. She nodded and walked to the open door. "I can't," she said, her voice trembling as she looked inside. Hal sighed and took her inside. He asked her to pick out some clothes and get ready. He packed the rest of her clothes into the suitcase. He carefully stepped over a big stain on the carpet and gathered her items from the bathroom into her makeup kit. He brought that back out and added it to the suitcase. He opened a plastic bag for her dirty clothes and included that before closing the suitcase. He looked at Sam and noticed how she had changed. She wore his black t-shirt under a soft, light gray sweater with a deep V neckline. She also had on dark gray yoga pants and new sneakers with ankle socks, waiting for him to say something. "Wow, you look really nice," he said. Her smile brightened up her face but turned shy after that. He nodded for her to take her suitcase as he left the room, with her following closely. He stepped into his unit and sighed. They had not cleaned the mess on the carpet and walls. He looked at her. "You should wait here. The room is not very nice." She nodded, and he went back inside. He carefully stepped around the mess to get to his bathroom, took a quick shower, dried off, shaved, and used deodorant before packing his things. Finally, he cleaned his knife, promising himself to do a more thorough job that night. He returned to the hall, stepping around the mess. He heard a sound and looked up to see Sam looking towards the door. He realized he was still in his underwear. Quickly, he put on some briefs, running pants, and his last black shirt. He unlocked the larger suitcase and pulled out socks and his boots. He sealed up the luggage, locked it, and carried it to the door. "Let's go," he said, and they stepped outside. Hal loaded their suitcases into the trunk and held her door open as she got in. She sat down and tucked her legs inside while he closed the door and walked around to his side. When he started the car, a police cruiser behind him backed up to clear the way. Hal pulled out of the spot and drove through the neighborhood to the interstate. The police car followed them to the next exit where it turned off. Hal glanced at Sam, who leaned back in her seat with her head turned towards him. "Tough night, huh?" he said kindly. She gave him a weak smile. "Actually, I had a nice shower and my hair feels cleaner than it's been in months. The bed was soft and I was sleeping well until those men came into my room. I was really scared." Her smile turned into a frown. "I thought they had harmed you and were going to take me back." He nodded, understanding the fear she felt. "But that's not what happened," he said softly. "No. I hid under the blanket and jumped every time there was a loud noise. I was so scared." She looked at him with wide eyes. "Then it was over, and you were calmly talking to me like nothing had happened. You seemed fine, and they were gone." He shook his head. This was important to him. One man lived. She just stared at him as they drove through the countryside. She didn't know this man well, yet he had protected her from danger. He had brought her along on a trip he didn't want to share and had taken care of her needs. Now, he had even fought for her. She wasn't sure how to feel. He didn't seem to expect anything in return, but she felt thankful nonetheless. "Thank you for saving me," she said, tears welling in her eyes, but she held them back because he didn't need to see them. He glanced at her and nodded. The miles to Springfield passed quickly, and he pulled off the highway for breakfast. They enjoyed their meal in quiet companionship before getting back on the road. "Where will we stay tonight?" she asked. "A little place called St. Charles, Missouri, which is just west of St. Louis. I booked a hotel room with 2 queen beds since that was all they had. I could find a different place with more rooms, but—" "No, I mean that's not needed. After last night, I'd feel safer if we shared a room," she said hopefully. He thought for a moment. Would she be safer with him? He had faced threatening men last night, so he felt a strange calm this morning. As long as he didn't think about what lay ahead and the hard choice he would have to make. He looked at Sam, who appeared to be waiting anxiously for his response. Okay, we can try that. I should warn you, though. I don't sleep soundly and can react strongly to unexpected things, as you saw last night. Please let me know if you need to get up before you move around. She nodded, understanding his concerns. Waking me by talking to me is okay, but please don't come near the bed until I'm awake and can respond normally, he explained. Is that a condition? She asked, and her question hit him hard. How could he explain? He couldn't. He wasn't sure if he even had the right to. But still, he could offer her something. Yes, I see someone about it, was safe enough to share. She nodded and looked out her window. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He didn't want to lie to her. The endless flat land soon lulled Sam to sleep. Hal realized she hadn't rested much at the station. Now he had time to think, but all he could think about was how nice Sam looked in her new outfit. He felt a tug in his heart, one he hadn't felt in a long time. He brushed that feeling aside, as it reminded him of how he acted when he first met Lisa in high school. On his first day, Hal quickly learned that Lisa enjoyed causing trouble and had a way of getting attention from the boys. Everyone, including many teachers, was often distracted by her charm, and she thrived on it. Her ability to weave in and out of the hearts of many made her both liked and disliked at school. By the time he got to Lisa's school, Hal had already gone through a tough life in foster care and trouble with the law. He felt lost and on a downward path. Lisa noticed his struggles and pulled him into her whirlwind of chaos. They began their rebellion in a very public way. Their actions became more daring as time went on. Lisa would pretend to be with a popular athlete, and Hal would fiercely confront him, thinking he was protecting her. He didn't see that he was playing right into her hands. As she encouraged him, the conflicts kept escalating. By the end of their first month together, they were on the run, having taken a school bus, leaving their driver hurt at the school. During their trial, a judge with military ties gave Hal a choice: spend years locked away or join a special program to help him manage his energy. He chose the program, hoping for a better future. Lisa, meanwhile, received different help. She learned how to navigate the system and came out with her diploma and a scholarship for dental hygiene training. 10 years later, Hal was one of the program's shining successes. He was ready for the next step. He returned to regular life with a management job in a small company in northern New York. Even though he still had duties and was sent on various missions, he always returned home, healed and ready to contribute to society once more. His success in the program continued. Soon he no longer returned from missions hurt. Those lessons were behind him. Then came the day he noticed her. Lisa was having lunch at an outdoor cafe, and a young man at the next table was trying hard to get her attention. She seemed to enjoy playing with him, and Hal felt drawn to her as well. He walked right up to her table and sat down across from her. The young man tried to object, but Hal firmly held his finger and calmly asked if he could manage without it. Hal and Lisa spent the rest of the day lost in each other's presence. He suddenly came back to reality, remembering Lisa and the effect she always had on him. He realized now their relationship wasn't healthy. His supervisor had mentioned this several times. Hal's good performance in his missions allowed him to stay with her. He knew that any slip in his work would lead to serious consequences. As he focused on the road again, he saw signs for Terre Haute. They would stop for lunch, and he was letting Sam choose the place this time. As he pulled off the ramp, he called to her. "Sam, we're stopping for lunch." "What? Lunch?" she asked, blinking sleep from her eyes. "Where are we?" "Terre Haute, Indiana. I'm just going to drive up the street to see what options we have." They went a few blocks when Sam made a little sound, showing something had caught her eye. It was an Applebee's, so he turned into the parking lot. She looked at him. "Are you okay with this?" He smiled and nodded. "It's fine." They got out, and he quickly checked the area before locking up the car while Sam waited for him. He walked to her side and she took his arm as they headed to the front door. He wondered when they had started this touching, but then realized it had begun back at the police station. He considered pulling away, but he didn't really mind. Sam seemed happy too. They went inside, and Sam smiled widely when the friendly hostess greeted her and led them to a table. It was such a contrast from the treatment she had received the night before. Hal took a seat and watched the door, surprised when Sam sat next to him. She had done the same the night before. She eagerly looked over the menu while Hal decided on a small salad. Honestly, he wasn't very hungry. The waitress was also warm with Sam, her cheeks rosy from all the smiling. "Thank you so much for these new clothes. They make such a difference," Sam exclaimed when they were alone again. "They're just clothes. You're still you. If it takes a new outfit for them to treat you well, that shows more about them than you," he said with a small shrug. She leaned against him, squeezing his arm gently. That felt nice, but Hal was uneasy about feeling this way. "Sam, I need you to stop." She leaned back and looked at him. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you think I was after anything." She began to move away from the bench, but he took her hand. "No, that's not what I meant. You've been very kind, and I know you've been through a lot. It makes sense that you might feel thankful." He paused to take some deep breaths because he didn't want to discuss his wife, but it was necessary. He noticed the sad look on her face, so he placed his other hand over hers and looked into her eyes. "I'm married, and have been for years. That's really important to me, but recent events have shown me something very hard to face." He winced as a wave of emotion hit him. He took a deep breath and started again. "I'm not great at understanding my wife. She's much better at reading me. I think she has been hiding things from me our entire marriage, probably since we met in school. I'm not sure if she really loves me or if she ever did. I noticed some patterns a few days ago. I need to figure this out before I can move forward." He sighed. "I can be completely unaware of feelings. That's one thing I appreciate about you. I can read your emotions easily. It's such a relief." Sam looked like she might cry again, but there was a small smile on her face. "I'm sorry about your wife. I have to say, I've heard many men say their wives don't understand them, that their marriage was a mistake, and that they were looking for something more. This is the first time I've heard the opposite. It's refreshing," she said softly. He raised an eyebrow in surprise, and she smiled shyly. "I like you too, but I won't rush you into anything until you're ready." She tilted her head down and peeked at him from under her bangs. "Is it okay if I keep holding your arm and hand? It helps me feel calm," she said quickly. He looked at her nervous face and nodded. She was so much easier to read than Lisa. The waitress arrived and took their orders. When she left, Sam looked at Hal in surprise. "Only a salad?" he chuckled. "These aren't exactly the healthiest salads. If I added dressing, it might have as many calories as your chicken tenders and fries." She looked concerned. "Am I overeating?" "No, that's not what I meant. Eat what you want. You seem to take care of yourself very well," Hal said awkwardly. The shy smile returned to her lips as her eyes fell to his hand on hers. She noticed a scar on the back of his hand. Her brow furrowed as she turned his hand over to see another scar on his palm. Something must have hurt his hand. She remembered seeing his back was marked with many scars, too. "How did you get all these scars?" she asked. He shook his head. "I can't share that. It's best not to ask." She nodded but seemed a bit uneasy. "I think of them as lessons. I don't get them anymore." "You work as an inventory control manager?" she asked. He nodded. "That's my job. We won't talk about other things." She nodded again, then smiled. "What kind of movies do you like?" He looked at her carefully. "You might laugh." Now she grinned, happy to hear more. "I promise I won't. What is it? Musicals?" He gave her a puzzled look. "Musicals? No." He glanced around. They were still alone. "I like animation. Anything animated?" Sam was surprised. This was not what she expected. "What was the last one you saw?" He smiled at the memory. "Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It's a truly wonderful film." "So you like superhero movies?" she guessed. "No, not really. Before that one, I watched My Neighbor Totoro." He noticed her confused look and added, "It's a Japanese animated film about a family moving to the countryside and meeting friendly spirits. It's a sweet story." She smiled at him. "You are full of surprises." He looked at her with caution. "That's good?" "Very good," she insisted. Their food arrived, and seeing Sam's joy made Hal feel pleased. He realized that she often made him feel this way, much more than Lisa ever did. His wife only seemed happy when he felt uneasy around her. He ate his salad while thinking about it. When they finished, he paid and asked the waitress where the closest Walmart was. She suggested a mall just south of the highway. They got there quickly, and once inside, Hal found a store to buy more black T-shirts and running pants. Sam enjoyed strolling through the mall with him, and that's what they did. He noticed her eyes land on a display of gold bangles in a jewelry store window. They were on sale. On a whim, Hal led them into the store, and Sam's eyes widened in surprise. He thought it would be kind to buy her one instead of just teasing her with them. He wondered why he felt so drawn to do this. After they left the store, Hal was amazed by the clever sales talk. His wallet was lighter by $400, and Sam was thrilled, wearing 5 beautiful bangles that jingled happily on her wrist. "Oh my gosh, Hal! I've never worn anything this lovely!" she exclaimed. He nodded and guided her outside to the car. He stopped to fill the gas tank. Then they were back on the interstate towards St. Charles. He remembered that for this overnight stay, he had a single hotel room with 2 beds. The way Sam looked at him made him feel a bit uneasy. He needed to address it. "Sam, I don't want you to misunderstand about the bangles." He could tell he had her attention now. "I didn't buy those for you thinking I'd get anything in return. I'm a married man and I keep my promises. I don't really know why I bought them, except they made you smile. You haven't smiled enough lately." He glanced over, and her big, beautiful eyes were watery again as she bit her lip. "I've upset you again, haven't I?" She shook her head quickly. "You're such a nice man. Thank you for getting me this lovely gift." Hal nodded and turned back to the road, thinking about her words. It seemed innocent enough, so he set it aside. The scenery was pretty boring, and Sam eventually fell asleep. Later, Hal woke her up to see the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. She was happy to have seen it. The hotel was close to the highway. They drove around and noticed a movie theater. "We have time. How about we catch a movie? We can get dinner after," he suggested. She smiled and nodded. "You choose the movie." They parked and walked to the entrance to check the listings. "Is there anything you definitely don't want to see?" Hal asked, since he didn't know much about the movies showing. "I really don't like horror. Are you okay with comedies?" Sam asked, pointing at a poster. He nodded, so he bought the tickets, popcorn, and drinks. The theater was mostly empty, which meant they had great seats. Hal didn't find most of the jokes funny, but he loved hearing Sam's joyful laughter, which made the movie enjoyable for him. After the movie, Sam took him to a nearby P.F. Chang's for dinner. Hal noticed her wearing her bangles, and the hostess complimented her. Sam's face lit up with joy, and Hal agreed that they were a great choice. He thought they suited her nicely. Sam encouraged Hal to try some dishes from the menu, and he liked most of what he tasted. He didn't mention his time in mainland China, as this food was nothing like what he had before. When they finished their meal, they drove to the hotel and checked in with their luggage. They went to their room, which was new for Sam, while Hal saw it as just another hotel stay. "I'll take the bed closest to the door," he said. "If you need to get up, just call out. Please don't come near my bed without speaking to me first. I want to hear your voice before it feels safe." Sam nodded seriously, understanding him. "If you want to use the bathroom first, go ahead. I usually exercise before bed." "Really? I thought working out before bed would make it harder to sleep," she said, surprised. "Not for me," he replied with a shrug. "You can watch TV or a movie if you'd like. I can ignore that." He opened his suitcase to grab his shorts, thinking that he couldn't work out without them. He knew he had to keep his underwear on. He didn't like changing his usual ways, but he had to. He changed to his lighter clothes and set aside the ones he wouldn't need right away. He noticed Sam watching him closely. "What's up?" he asked. Her eyes looked over his injuries. "Tough lessons, huh? Were you a slow learner?" He forced a smile. "Actually, I learned pretty quick." He didn't want to explain that many of the others didn't make it through the program. Seeing her doubt, he felt he should say more, but he couldn't share details. Just very strict teachers. He moved to the other side of the room by the windows. He cleared some furniture to make space for his exercises. "Stay clear of this area," he told Sam. She nodded and he began his workout. Today was about fighting moves. He started with punches and blocks, moving through different techniques until he got to kicks. He had to be careful. as mistakenly hitting anything could lead to injuries. He focused hard, pushing aside all distractions. Once he finished and was working on specific muscle groups, he noticed Sam watching from the bathroom door. She looked a bit nervous. "Is something wrong?" he asked, out of breath. She quickly stepped back into the bathroom and closed the door. He shrugged it off and returned to his workout. When he was almost done, Sam came back out. She was wearing the same black shirt again, but had another shirt in her hand. He saw that his shirt was missing. He raised an eyebrow at her. "I'm wearing it," she said softly. "It helps me feel more comfortable." Not sure how to respond, he grabbed his shorts and headed into the bathroom for a quick shower. When he came back, Sam was leaning on the headboard of her bed, reading a book she'd taken from her bag. She glanced at him. "Do you have any body fat?" she asked. He looked at himself and poked his belly and sides, feeling none. He shrugged and placed his dirty clothes in the laundry bag in his suitcase. He set out fresh clothes for the next day and closed the suitcase. Opening his other suitcase, he took out his knife and tools. He went into the bathroom to clean and sharpen the blade. He put everything back in the suitcase and locked it. He placed the knife on the nightstand. After removing the bedspread, he remembered it might trip Sam if she walked around at night. So he hung a couple of hangers on the doorknob as a little reminder. When he was finished, he lay back down on the bed. "Are you not going to get under the sheets?" she asked. "No. I don't like feeling trapped, and it's too easy to get all twisted up in them." He tucked his knife under his pillow. Hal leaned back and felt his mind start to relax. He was surprised by how quickly he was calming down. He thought Sam might distract him, but instead, he felt at ease. That unfamiliar feeling took him into the deepest sleep he had experienced in a long time. In the morning, they had breakfast in the small hotel restaurant, brushed their teeth, packed their bags, and headed to the car. Hal placed their luggage and her bag in the back. He briefly checked the vehicle before opening the door for Sam. She looked at him with curiosity, but he just smiled and shook his head. He didn't mention the handprint on the car. As they drove onto the interstate, Hal glanced in the rearview mirror, checking for any cars that might match the ones he noticed the day before. Nothing stood out. There were too many similar vehicles. He decided to keep watching. If someone was following them, they would slip up sooner or later. Then they would be his to handle. He felt a rush of excitement at the thought. The drive from St. Charles to Oklahoma City was long, and both of them were relieved to reach the hotel bed at the end of the day. They got into a comfortable routine on the road and found joy in being together. Hal kept picturing the cars that could be trailing them and narrowed down the possibilities. The fact that they weren't being confronted suggested it could be someone his handler set up to keep an eye on them. But it also might be someone else, waiting for the right moment. He stayed alert for that chance. The next morning, Sam picked a dress that matched the weather, and Hal told her how lovely she looked in it. Though the dress hugged her figure, it wasn't too revealing, so Hal tried not to stare too much. It also showcased her long legs nicely. Sam could see that Hal thought she looked great. Her shy smile showed she liked the attention her outfit brought. Her backpack didn't match the look, so he left it in the trunk. They would drive less distance that day compared to the previous one, aiming for the smaller town of Santa Rosa, New Mexico. Hal had a motel room booked and confirmed there were 2 beds. As the scenery changed, Sam noticed Hal's mood changing too. He wasn't very talkative, and he seemed even quieter as he looked around. When they finally got off the highway, she noticed how focused he was on the rearview mirror. There weren't many cars behind them. "Gotcha," Hal said softly. Sam turned to him and then looked back, but she didn't see anything unusual about the 3 cars coming down the ramp. "Is someone following us?" she asked, feeling nervous. He nodded as he turned onto Route 66, driving up a hill briefly before entering the parking lot of their motel. Hal parked the car in front of the office and got out to watch a dark sedan signal to turn into the gas station across the street, but then continue on. Sam got out of the car, glancing at Hal with worry. "They're gone. Let's see if they give up or keep following us," Hal said, taking note of everything he had seen. "Are they going to hurt us?" Sam asked, her voice shaky. Hal looked at Sam and noticed how anxious she was. He shook his head. "I don't think so. It looks like they're just watching us and where we're going. If I'm wrong, don't worry, I can handle it. I won't let anything happen to you. Sam smiled at him from across the car hood, but he could still see that she was uneasy. A dark thought crossed his mind about wanting to confront the men who were bothering her. He felt concerned about that feeling, but pushed it aside, thinking of Sam first. He entered the office with his hand on her back, which seemed to help her relax. He checked in and paid for the room, but noticed the clerk giving him an odd look when he confirmed they needed 2 beds. The clerk's gaze lingered on Sam. They drove a short distance to their room, backing the car into the spot outside. After bringing their luggage inside, they checked out the place. It was basic, not as modern as some other places they'd stayed. "I'll take the bed by the door," he said. "Same rules as before, okay?" Sam nodded and smiled, remembering how smoothly the previous night had gone. She had woken up once, and he had responded quickly when she called for the bathroom. She thought he had been asleep, but realized he must sleep lightly. "Let's see what good food we can find in Santa Rosa," Hal said cheerfully as he opened the map app on his phone. They looked at their options and decided to try Joseph's Bar and Grill, since it had some of Hal's favorite Mexican dishes. The drive was quick, and they were happy to get a booth when they arrived. Hal persuaded Sam to try the chicken quesadillas while he enjoyed his tamales. He surprised Sam when he spoke to the waitress in Spanish to place their order. The young woman took their order with a big smile. "Aren't you full of surprises? How many other languages do you know?" Sam joked. Hal smiled a little shyly. "A few." Sam's eyes grew wide as she realized he was serious. "The mysterious Mr. Demon," she said with a sigh, thinking this might be another secret of his. Her curiosity got the better of her. "What languages?" she asked eagerly. Hal thought about it and decided he didn't need to explain why he learned those languages. Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, Mandarin, Cantonese, Arabic, Russian, Turkish, Hindi, and of course English. "I'm not an expert in all, but I can get by and understand enough." "To my ear, you speak Spanish like a native," she said with admiration. He looked out the window, lost in thoughts about his past. "I think I spent some of my early years in a place like this. It brings back memories not all good." Sam looked at him sadly. "You don't remember where you grew up?" He shook his head and offered a forced smile. "It doesn't matter. That was then. I focus on now." He couldn't tell her how much he had lost after doctors worked on his mind. All he knew was that the memories left were not happy, but he could manage in life now. She nodded, but kept her gaze on him. "How about you? Do you ever feel like learning another language?" he asked to steer the topic away from himself. She blushed. "I don't think I could learn a new language. Besides, isn't English spoken everywhere?" He laughed a little. "It is in many places, but not all. If you go beyond the big cities where business happens, local languages take over. In some rural areas, they may not even know about the U.S. The world doesn't revolve around the U.S. That's one of the biggest lessons I've learned from my travels. I'd love to travel someday. This trip has already opened my eyes. I'm seeing so much of the country," Sam said with a bright smile. Hal found himself looking forward to seeing her smile. He loved how her smile showed off her teeth, adding a fun twist to her expression. He felt uneasy about how much he needed to see her happy. He wasn't sure what their future looked like. Everything depended on what would happen in Los Angeles. "What's wrong? You were smiling and then you looked like you might cry," she said gently. "Cry? No, I haven't done that in a long time." His mind flashed to the tough days after the trial when he was a teenager, separated from Lisa and sent to the military hospital. There had been tears and feelings he preferred not to think about. The journey to become who he was now had been tough and painful, a time he didn't want to revisit. The waitress brought their plates, pulling him from those memories. He smiled and switched to Spanish to thank her, also complimenting her in the restaurant for their great service. The young woman lit up with happiness as she thanked him and hurried back to the kitchen. "I think you really like that," Sam said with a knowing smile. "It's true," he replied, accepting the compliment. Hal then showed her how to enjoy her quesadillas. After her first bite, she gave him a bright smile. "Oh, wow! This is my new favorite meal," she exclaimed. Laughing, Hal began his meal. It was delicious, and he nodded in approval. They focused on the food, enjoying every bite. After finishing their main course, they decided to order dessert. Sam chose coconut cream pie while Hal went for apple pie with ice cream. They agreed they had eaten a lot when they leaned back against the soft cushions, but they felt good. Hal experienced a wave of true happiness he had never felt before. He was relaxed, and his companion was wonderful and just as cheerful. She liked being around him. There were no expectations or judgments. This peaceful moment felt special, delicate, and amazing. He suddenly wondered why he had never felt this way with Lisa. She had excited him, but soon he would feel unworthy and insecure, and the pressure would build until he lost his temper. Then, Lisa would have the upper hand. Now he sensed that his happiness was at risk of vanishing like a bubble. His worry about this realization began to spoil his contentment. He tried to hide it, but Sam noticed his change in mood and looked at him with concern. He paid the bill and left a generous tip. They wandered into the gift shop and browsed the souvenirs. On impulse, Hal picked up a CD of classic music from the Route 66 era. Sam held up a dark blue t-shirt with a big Route emblem on it. He imagined how nice it would look on her. She smiled playfully and bit her lip. He took the shirt from her hands and added it to the CD at the counter while she giggled softly. They walked to the car, and he made sure the area was safe before they got in. His sense of peace was fading. The hotel was their spot for the night. Hal locked the door and got ready. Because of the large meal, he decided to move his workout to the morning. He changed into his shorts while Sam was in the shower. When she came out of the bathroom, he noticed her long blonde hair was still damp. He felt a sudden urge to touch it. "Can I brush your hair?" he said without thinking. Sam looked surprised but smiled and handed him the brush. She sat at the edge of his bed. He moved closer and gently ran his fingers through her hair. She let out a soft sigh from his light touch. He carefully brushed through her lovely hair, from her scalp to the tips. He was amazed by how much hair she had and how soft it felt. "Your hair feels great. Is your shampoo and conditioner working for you?" Hal asked quietly. Feeling a little excited, she just nodded. Once he finished brushing, he admired the shine of her hair. "Can I braid it for you?" he asked. She really wanted to keep feeling his hands in her hair. "Yes, please," she replied softly. He used the comb to divide her hair and started weaving it into a thick braid. Sam tried to stay still, feeling the pleasant tingles from his strong hands as he worked with her hair. When he finished, she focused on tying the end of the braid with a small band. "Thank you. You did such a nice job," she said, slightly breathless. "Your hair is fantastic," Hal replied with a smile. She felt herself blush, and they both fell quiet, unsure of what to say next. "I guess we should go to bed our own beds," Hal suggested. She laughed lightly, feeling the tension ease, and nodded as she returned to her bed. Once they were ready, Hal turned off the light and lay back. He felt a strong urge to run his hands through her hair again. He tried to push that thought aside, but it lingered longer than usual that night. Sam watched his shape against the faint light coming through the curtains. She, too, struggled with her desire to feel his touch once more. Both found it hard to drift off to sleep. Sam woke up to a noise and opened her eyes. The clock showed it was just after 1 in the morning. She saw Hal sitting up in bed, breathing heavily. Maybe he'd had a bad dream. Outside, she could hear keys jingling as someone dropped them in the parking lot. Her gaze returned to Hal. She quietly admired him. He had treated her better than anyone ever had. He was gentle and patient, always wanting to see her smile. She remembered the way he looked at her with a smile that matched her own. She had never felt this happy before. She knew he was dealing with some personal issues, and she had promised herself not to interfere, but hearing him breathe hard was difficult for her to ignore. She needed to help him go back to sleep. Sam pushed her covers aside and moved over to his bed. Hal suddenly turned his head towards her and grabbed her softly around the neck. She was lifted off the ground and dropped onto his bed before she could understand what was happening. His body was pressed against hers, and his other hand quickly covered her mouth, making it hard for her to breathe. She attempted to push him away, but he was too strong. Looking up at him, she saw his face in shadows. He seemed to be watching her without saying a word. Then she felt something strange. He was becoming excited, and it pressed against her. She managed to move her head slightly to breathe, but the pressure was both confusing and alarming as he kept watching her quietly. She needed air, but his hold tightened and fear filled her heart. She felt trapped. A loud noise came from outside their door, and Hal's face turned to look that way. A beam of light broke through the curtains, revealing his eyes, which appeared cold and emotionless. The noise shifted to the sound of someone struggling with the door. A slurred voice came through. "Separate beds, stupid, here I am!" Hal jumped off the bed, letting Sam breathe again. As the door began to open, Hal's hand shot out to grab the man's neck. The man looked surprised as Hal pulled him inside. Hal's fist hit the man's face hard, and he fell, unable to stay awake. "Hal!" Sam shouted, even though her voice was weak from the earlier pressure. Hal's punch stopped just before it landed, and he swayed as he let go of the man. "Sam!" Hal's voice was filled with worry. "I'm okay. You didn't hurt me," she said, trying to reassure him. Hal turned on a lamp next to the door and looked down at the man in the entrance. "It's the clerk from the front desk." He leaned down and sniffed. "I smell alcohol." Suddenly, red and blue lights filled the doorway as a police car drove into the lot. The sheriff stepped out, put on his hat, and walked over to the door, glancing at the clerk. "What happened here?" the sheriff asked, noticing the marks on Hal's body. "The clerk tried to break in. I stopped him," Hal replied, his voice steady and cold. He flinched when Sam lightly touched his arm. She had wrapped a sheet around herself and was now standing beside him. "I heard someone say he was coming in to see me. He used harsh words," Sam told the sheriff. "So your partner got jealous and hurt him?" the officer asked, noticing a mark on Sam's neck from Hal's grip. "We're not together," Sam blurted. The sheriff nodded at Hal's hand. "He seems to be with someone. That mark on your neck isn't just a scrape. Are you okay?" The officer placed his hand on his holster, making Sam tense up. Hal tried to calm himself. He had learned how to handle moments like this. "I have serious PTSD. I was woken up too suddenly just before the clerk arrived." He looked at Sam. "I'm very sorry for any trouble I caused you." "It's fine," Sam insisted. "I forgot to call out to you. It was my mistake." The sheriff looked at Sam with concern, thinking she was just another person blaming herself for what had happened. He turned his attention to Hal. "I think it's time for you to leave Santa Rosa. Gather your things and go." Sam made a sound of protest, but Hal gently touched her arm and nodded to the sheriff. "We will leave right away." Hal motioned for Sam to get her clothes and dress in the bathroom. He packed his suitcase, hiding a small item he found under his pillow. When Sam returned with her makeup kit, Hal took his turn to get ready in the bathroom. When he came out, the sheriff was speaking softly but firmly to Sam, likely trying to help her escape from Hal. The officer seemed determined, and Sam's words of denial didn't seem to reach him. An ambulance arrived, and they waited for the clerk to be taken away on a stretcher. The man was waking up and complaining about his sore nose. Once they could access their car, Hal loaded their suitcases into the trunk. He opened Sam's door for her and then faced the sheriff as he closed the door. "You got here pretty quickly after he broke in. Were you nearby?" The sheriff shot Hal a hard look. "We received an anonymous call from someone concerned." Hal looked across the parking lot at the gas station. A dark sedan was parked there, likely those concerned citizens. He nodded, walked around to his side of the car, and got in. Sam watched him with worry. He waited until the sheriff got back into his cruiser, then he drove out of the parking lot. The sheriff followed closely behind him, likely to track him out of town. Hal kept an eye on the rearview mirror and saw the sheriff leave the gas station to tail them. He merged onto the interstate and noticed the sheriff continue past the exit. A little while later, a pair of headlights appeared on the road behind them. "Where are we heading now?" Sam asked softly. Hal turned to her, feeling a heavy weight in his chest from knowing he had hurt her. "I am really sorry for what I did. I knew it wasn't safe to be near me. I should have made sure we had separate rooms." "No! We were okay the night before. I messed up. That nearly cost you everything because of me. I feel awful," he said, his voice full of pain. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles turning white. He focused on the road and noticed the lights behind them were far back. He hadn't realized how heavy his breathing had become and tried to calm down. "You are not a bad person," Sam said softly, almost as if she was trying to convince herself. I feel like part of me is, he admitted. You said it was just stress. It's not. I said that for the sheriff. It's a hard truth. He looked at her. But you saw the darkness in me. It affected you. A wave of fear passed over him. I can't let that happen again. They continued driving in silence, lost in their own thoughts. What? Where does the darkness come from? Sam asked carefully. He cast her a gloomy look, but then focused on the road. It felt easier that way. It has always been inside me. Now, I try to keep it hidden. I can't talk about it, but since it almost hurt you, you deserve to know. You can't tell anyone about this. It's not safe for you. He locked eyes with her and she nodded, a look of fear in her wide eyes. Hal felt uncomfortable inside, knowing he was the cause of her fear. She didn't deserve it. You're married. The straightforward question hit him hard. He nodded. She knows. It wasn't really a question. Yes. Have you ever heard her? He took a shaky breath. Sam had no idea how these questions were affecting him, but he felt overwhelmed. Yes. Are you going to L.A. because she left you? Sam asked gently. She was far from the truth, and Hal let out a surprised laugh before quickly silencing himself. She hasn't left me. He realized he wished she would. It would make things simpler. She won't leave until she gets what she wants. What? Please, I can't talk about it. Hal tightened his grip on the wheel until he felt the stitching dig into his skin. He forced himself to relax. I'm sorry, Sam said. I really like you. I hate seeing you hurt, and I want to help. If talking will help, I'm here to listen. Hal felt the urge to laugh at the absurdity of it, but he kept it in. The woman he almost harmed wanted to help him? Thank you. The moment he said those words, he felt how inadequate they were. This woman, who seemed so different from the life he was used to, one filled with darkness and constant danger, had somehow found her way into his thoughts. Until now, only Lisa had held that place. She had taken over his heart from the moment they met back in high school, and no one else had ever come close to affecting him in the same way. He didn't quite know what to make of this new feeling. It felt out of place in his life now. He was still tied to Lisa. She had a strong hold on him, one that hadn't lessened over time. Since that first day, he'd felt pulled to her, fully under her spell. When he left for the army, he and Lisa were separated for over 10 years. He returned a different man, having gone through rigorous training in the Ghost Ops division. The work had shaped him, honing his mind and body to fit both civilian life and the intense requirements of his missions. On the day he met Lisa again, she had been quick to see if he still fit the mold she remembered. Their reunion had tested both of them, and when she looked at him with satisfaction, he felt a familiar pull deepen inside him. At one point, his handler had even considered removing Lisa from his life, concerned she would interfere with his role. But Hal managed to convince his handler to give him a chance to prove he could keep his focus. He succeeded, meeting every target with accuracy and efficiency, which earned him enough respect to eventually marry Lisa. Their marriage started off with balance. He kept the darker parts of himself under control and was able to keep her happy. But every so often things grew strained. Lisa would become restless, and his unease would grow. In those periods, Lisa would find ways to test his patience, pushing boundaries in public places just to provoke him. She thrived on drawing attention, often encouraging strangers to flirt simply to trigger his jealousy. It would drive him to the edge, and eventually, he'd have to confront these situations. Every time, he'd try to stay calm, but the tension would rise until it inevitably snapped, pulling out a side of him he fought to contain. There were times he barely managed to hold back. He'd come close to losing control on several occasions. Each time, he was left with the reminder of how deeply he was tied to her. Later, she claimed that the man had gotten her too tipsy to know what was happening. Lisa was always there to face his darker side after it took control, and it took something from her that she willingly gave. During this rising tension, his supervisor came back to warn him that if Lisa kept acting out, they would have to take action. While Hal's work had not been affected, it was becoming more likely that Lisa would push him into situations they could not handle. However, this warning remained just that, as Hal had become too important to the project to risk upsetting his happiness or work. He realized he wasn't truly happy, and Lisa's desire to draw out his darker side only grew stronger. As that grew, his happiness faded, but Lisa was satisfied because she was getting what she wanted, as she always did. Their time together in the shower recently, when he nearly lost control, was a turning point for him. He finally understood she wouldn't stop until something terrible happened. The thought scared him, but he felt powerless in their relationship. Enter Chet. Hal found the man sitting in the waiting room of the dental office where Lisa worked. The moment their eyes met, Hal knew he was dealing with another man who posed a danger, one who had been visiting Lisa at work. Chet was tall, young, good-looking, tanned, and blonde, with a strong build that made him look like a college athlete or surfer. But it was his cold, lifeless eyes locked onto Hal's that revealed his true character. Before Hal could react, Chet stood up, walked casually to the front desk, and told the office assistant he would reschedule his appointment. Then he looked at Hal and asked the assistant to tell Lisa he would see her at their 6 p.m. meeting on the 20th. As Hal pondered that, Chet smiled smugly and left. When Hal asked Lisa about the 6 p.m. on the 20th, she laughed it off, saying Chet must have gotten the date wrong since she would be in L.A. for a conference. With a light laugh, she dismissed Hal's worries and said everything would be fine. The way she smiled made Hal's heart sink. At that moment, he realized Lisa had her own dark side, too. They stopped in Albuquerque to find a hotel room to rest. As Sam spoke softly, she insisted she felt safer sharing a room with him than being in separate rooms with people possibly following them. Hal didn't have the energy to argue, especially when she touched his arm and looked at him with her big, innocent eyes. He reminded her of their rules, and then they managed to get some much-needed rest. They started later than usual, but they had already covered some distance. They stopped for brunch in Gallup, once again choosing an Applebee's. It was clear that Sam loved this place. She was wearing her blue Route 66 t-shirt and light gray yoga pants, which caught the attention of the waitstaff and Hal. She enjoyed the focus he placed on her. When he questioned her about her outfit, she put on a sweet, innocent look. Her soft giggle when he gave up made him smile. Her happiness filled him with warmth. He started to hope for a future where he could hear that laugh every day. The countryside had changed a lot as they traveled west, and Hal struggled to push aside memories that were trying to come up. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He pulled over at a rest stop and got out to stretch. Sam joined him outside, watching his face, trying to understand why he looked a bit sad. She noticed the concern on his face. That made him smile. He felt like hugging her, but decided against it and crossed his arms instead. "Is something wrong? Can I help?" she asked gently. He sighed, thinking it might be good to share what was on his mind. He pointed to the landscape around them. "Seeing places like this brings back memories from my childhood. I can't remember specific details, but this all feels familiar. Hot, dry, lonely. It keeps coming back to me." He felt a little startled when Sam wrapped her arms around him in a hug. He uncrossed his arms and held her, feeling comfortable. The embrace felt nice and calming. When she pulled back, Hal wished she hadn't, but he couldn't help but react to her bright, joyful smile. "You need something fun to do," she said, looking inside the car and spotting a CD Hal had picked up. "Let's listen to it and sing along." "Sing?" Hal asked, surprised. "Come on. My voice isn't great, but I'll sing if it helps take your mind off things," she said with a playful grin. "I like your voice," he said before he realized he shouldn't have. "Oh, thanks, but I don't know why you would. It's not that special," she replied, her cheeks turning a lovely shade of pink, but her eyes sparkled. He locked the car and walked with her to the washrooms. After waiting while Sam used the ladies' room, they headed back to the car. As they walked, Hal kept an eye out for their follower. He noticed a dark car parked on the road near the rest stop. He hesitated, tempted to walk down there, but knew it wouldn't be safe. Instead, he opened the door for Sam and closed it gently after she got in. His old habits were coming back strong. They turned onto the highway, and Sam opened the CD case, putting the disc in the car's player. The music started, and Sam turned up the volume. She smiled at Hal and began to sing along to Nat King Cole's version of Route 66. Hal grinned because he knew her singing voice was just as captivating as her laughter. "Why aren't you singing with me?" she asked, pretending to be upset. He smiled back. 2 reasons. I don't know the words. But more important, your singing is so beautiful that I'd ruin it if I joined in. She rolled her eyes. Now I know you're joking. My singing sounds terrible. Frank always told me to stop when I sang. My family did too. Mom said I didn't have the voice of an angel, so I should find other ways to express myself. She shrugged with a little smile, looking at her nails shyly. Your mom was wrong, and I really want to teach Frank a lesson, he said, clearly upset. He tried to calm down and saw Sam watching him with big eyes. He eased his frown. I'm sorry for talking about your mom, but she was so wrong about your voice. He took a deep breath. And Frank still needs a lesson. She smiled at him shyly. You really like how I sing? I love your singing, he replied firmly. Sam's smile grew wider and she started to sing again. Soon she poured her heart into it, and Hal couldn't help but grin at the joy on her face. She loved to sing, and they had tried to make her stop. How frustrating. She was definitely on key, and her voice was strong. If anyone complained, it might have been about its roughness. Hal thought it was really charming. After all, Rod Stewart and Kim Carnes had built careers on their raspy voices, and Sam sang even better than them. They continued towards Flagstaff, with Sam singing happily and Hal letting go of painful memories from his past. Sam was beaming with joy as they arrived at the hotel parking lot near the highways 40 and 17 in Flagstaff. They had finished the music on the CD and were searching for radio stations in the empty area around them. There's a big store nearby. We can walk over and get more CDs for the next part of our trip, Hal suggested, and she nodded eagerly. There's also an Olive Garden close by. I'd love to stretch my legs after all this driving, she said with a smile. Me too. They grabbed their bags and went inside to check in. Hi, reservation for Demon, he said to the friendly clerk at the front desk. She looked for his name. Yes, I have you here for one night. A room with a king-size bed. No, sorry, I need 2 beds. We need 2 beds, he said, stumbling over his words. The young woman looked at them with curiosity before glancing back at her screen. Let me see if I can find you another room. We are quite booked tonight. I have 1 room available facing the courtyard with a balcony. A cancellation. We'll take it, Hal said, feeling relieved. They finished the reservation and soon they had key cards and were heading up to their room on the 2nd floor. Once inside, Sam rushed to the patio doors and stepped out onto the balcony. Oh, this is lovely, she exclaimed, taking in the view. She turned back to Hal with a bright smile. The warm afternoon sun highlighted her features, and Hal felt his breath catch. He'd never seen anyone look so radiant. She seemed to embody peace and happiness. His thoughts drifted to Lisa, and he felt a jolt of realization. Sam and Lisa were so different. While Sam was innocent and kind, Lisa often enjoyed having power over him, which caused him stress. It was surprising to notice how their tastes were even opposed, like light versus dark. Why did it take being with Sam to see how dull his life had become? Are you okay? Sam asked, looking at him with concern. He shook himself from his thoughts. Sam stood close, her hands resting gently near him, noticing that he seemed shaken. You think? I want to talk to you. About Lisa, my wife? Her eyes widened in surprise. He cleared his throat. Later, after dinner and shopping. Okay, that sounds good, she replied softly and smiled at him. He suddenly felt the urge to lean in closer, but he stepped back. Sorry, we should get moving. I'm hungry. Are you hungry? He said quickly. She nodded and locked the patio door. They took their keys and went downstairs. Once outside, she looked at him curiously, and he pointed to the corner of the parking lot. They found a pathway leading to the restaurant. They had a little wait outside with others, feeling hungry too. 2 couples stood nearby, clearly together, but they were making comments that made Hal uncomfortable, especially about Sam. He felt a growl of frustration rise in him. He glanced at Sam and was surprised to see a determined look on her face. She met his gaze. Trust me? She whispered, and he nodded. She moved behind him, and he felt her warmth as she placed her chin on his shoulder. She wrapped her arms around his sides, and he felt a shiver run through him. He noticed the 4 people were silent now, their attention fully on them. Sam grabbed the bottom of his t-shirt and slowly lifted it, revealing his toned stomach. She gently placed her hand on his muscles, noticing how the others were watching her closely. Then she pulled him back toward her. "At least I don't have to pretend," she said with a light laugh. Two men glared at Sam, clearly bothered by her boldness, yet they seemed uneasy because of Hal's strong build and the impression that he could be very tough. The two women shifted nervously as they noticed his figure. When he looked at them, each took a step back behind their partners, showing signs of unease. Finally, they decided to leave and walked back to the parking lot. Sam let go of his shirt and stepped back slightly, still close. She rested her forehead against him, her hands on his shoulders. Hal could feel her shake a little. "Hey, I've never heard you talk like that before. Are you okay?" She took a deep breath. "No, that was tougher than I thought." He stood quietly, allowing Sam to find her balance again. "Well, what you said had a big impact." "It wasn't me." He turned his head to see her but couldn't. "It sounded like it was you." She let out a small laugh that sent a tingle down his neck. "I mean, those words were from Maureen, one of my old co-workers. She was fiery and had a sharp way of talking. She sounds interesting." "She was." Her voice softened, and Hal sensed there was more behind it. "Frank?" Sam leaned against him, sadness filling the space between them. She wrapped her arms around him again, this time seeking comfort. She smiled gently as he covered her hands with his. She must have had some tough moments with him. He hurt her badly. After that, she just vanished. Hal had heard enough. Frank needed to face the consequences. Hal was good at dealing with people like him. He would find a way to make sure Frank would pay for what he did. "Demon?" someone called out. Hal sighed and Sam chuckled lightly, stepping away from him. He turned and raised a hand to show they were coming. "Oh!" Sam said, surprised. He looked at her and noticed her cheeks were quite pink. She was glancing down at the front of his pants. He quickly moved his hands to cover himself. Sorry about that. It's from earlier when you were touching my stomach. Not from just now." His face felt warm as he tried to explain. She smiled playfully. "It's nice to know I can still have that effect on someone." He motioned for her to go ahead into the restaurant. He wanted to hide his awkwardness behind her, but also couldn't help noticing how she looked in her tight yoga pants. The second thought didn't help with the first. Once they were seated, Sam couldn't hide her smile. "What?" Hal finally asked. "Sorry, I just feel really good about myself right now. I can't remember the last time I felt this way. This is probably the best day of my life." Hal paused, staring at her. His day had started off quite differently. He must have looked shocked because she waved her hand. "I meant from when we woke up in the hotel in Albuquerque," she clarified. "Ah," he replied and nodded. He chose soup, salad, and breadsticks because that was filling enough and he wasn't too hungry. Sam ordered lasagna. "I wonder if we will meet more of Frank's associates here," Hal said, glancing around at the other diners. When he turned back to Sam, he noticed she looked genuinely worried. "Hey, I wasn't serious. I'm sorry. There's nothing to worry about. I can handle anything someone like Frank throws at us. Unless he has a trained bear, then we could be in trouble." Sam laughed at his joke, but then her face turned serious. "I worry about the people following us." He nodded. "They might work for my employers and are just keeping an eye on me. Since I spotted them so quickly and they haven't been good at hiding, it's more likely someone connected to the trouble back in Columbus." "Someone connected to Frank." He looked at her and nodded. "Yeah, that's possible. But they have not made any moves, and I know they are aware that we see them. If they do make a move, they would be in a lot of trouble. They must be monitoring us for Frank or someone close to him." He paused, considering what it meant that they were going through so much to find Sam. He looked closely at her, and she seemed a bit taken aback by his intense look. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Why are they still after you after all this time? Do you have something of theirs? What's in that backpack?" She looked a bit defensive. "Just some personal things. A small family photo album. Some memories from my childhood, like my address book and favorite books, are important to me." He frowned. "Those don't seem like things Frank would care about. He just wants to be mean." Their food came, and they kept talking about what the men might want from her. She told Hal she didn't know anything about Frank's business. She was never around when he had meetings or made calls. He would just tell her to go away. After they finished dinner, they decided to take a walk. The night was nice, but getting cooler, so Sam needed a sweater. They crossed the street and went to Walmart. Hal got a shopping cart and Sam smiled back at him as they entered. He took her to the music section and they chose some CDs with songs she liked to sing. This made her very happy, which made him happy too. He also picked up a pack of black shirts and pretended to glare at her. "You keep messing up my shirts." Sam giggled, which made him smile even more. Next, he found a pink hoodie sweater for her. It fit well and would keep her warm on their walk back to the hotel. "Do you think we should get you a new backpack?" Hal asked. She looked at him with wide eyes. "You can keep larger things in your suitcase and use a smaller bag for what you need. What do you think?" Sam nodded slowly. "Let's check to see what they have and you can choose," he offered, making her feel more at ease. It took a little time, but they finally found the accessory section, which had many purses. Some were backpacks, which seemed to be what Sam liked. She noticed a nice black leather bag with golden zippers and buckles. Hal saw her look at the price tag and quickly put it back. But then he picked it back up and checked it out. It looked well made. "Do you like this one? Is it big enough for your things?" "It's too pricey. I'll decide that. You just need to say if it works for you," he insisted gently while looking into her eyes. "So?" She bit her lip and nodded. He put it in the cart. As they walked to the checkout, Sam linked her arm through his. "Thank you for being so kind. You've treated me better than anyone else," she said softly. "You don't need to thank me. You're worth it. You've helped me a lot too," he replied. "And the CDs are a gift for me, so I can hear you sing tomorrow." She smiled brightly at him, and he felt drawn to her smile. The urge to kiss her came again, but he turned his head to find the nearest cashier. He rolled the card into line, and a few moments later they were ready to leave. He had the cashier take off the tags from the sweater, so Sam put it on and zipped it up. He thought she looked very cute in it. It made him feel warm inside, but he pushed that feeling away. Then she put on the purse, and he nodded with approval. "That looks really nice." Sam was bouncing on her toes with happiness. Hal noticed this, and it caught his attention. He gently took her arm and guided her out of the store. They walked arm in arm across the parking lot and laughed as they crossed the street to the hotel. Soon, they were in their room. Sam placed her new purse on the bed next to her backpack, while Hal got them some water. They went outside to sit on the balcony. She smiled at him, and he couldn't help but smile back. They relaxed in silence for a while, enjoying each other's company. Hal felt thankful she wasn't pushing him to talk yet. He needed to figure out what to say. He couldn't share anything about his job or the dangers that came with it. That wasn't important right now. What really mattered was what was happening inside him and Lisa's struggle to control it. As he began to speak, a part of him urged him to stop. He was afraid that sharing these secrets would scare Sam away, but maybe it was better for her to know. Breakfast the next morning was quiet. Sam was still thinking about what he had shared the night before. Learning that she was staying with a man who had a serious split within himself was likely unsettling. The fact that she had faced the darker side only made it harder. Hal gave Sam some space that morning. He thought she might be better off apart from him, but he also knew she didn't have many choices right now. She had to stick with him. The idea that she was with him out of necessity rather than desire made him feel awful. His sadness must have shown because, as they finished eating, he felt a soft hand cover his on the table. He looked up surprised and saw her small smile and kind eyes. It stirred something in him, a deep feeling. "I'm sorry for making you sad, Hal," she said gently. "You've been so kind to me since we met, and here I am doubting you." "No, you need to. You've seen my darker side, so you know I can be dangerous. Sometimes. You have to take care of yourself first," he insisted. "But you seem so unhappy," she replied. He turned his hand to hold hers, softly rubbing his thumb across it. He kept his eyes on her hand as he searched for the right words to say. "For the first time in my life, I am truly happy without the worry and fear that troubled me during my marriage. Yes, I'm sad I've pushed you away, but that's not the important part. I know I don't deserve this, and you should keep some distance because you are a good person. The truth is, I'm not," Sam protested, holding his hand tighter. "You're a good person, too. You just have this other part of you. I see now that you can't completely change it, but at least you have things that help keep it under control." She sighed. "I can't say I'll ever be completely at ease with it. It's like having something dangerous in the house. But I lived with someone who was much worse for almost 12 years. I never knew if he would be kind or suddenly angry. You're much more stable than he ever was, and you have fewer rules." She looked at him with hope. "I would like to stay with you for a while longer if that's okay." Hal felt a wave of relief wash over him, and he let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He raised her hand and kissed her knuckles. Then he realized what he'd just done and quickly pulled back. His eyes widened as he looked at her, worried she might be upset. Her face was a pretty shade of pink, and her eyes sparkled with joy. "Oh, I'm so sorry! I don't know what came over me," Hal exclaimed. A big smile lit up her face. "No one has ever kissed my hand like that before. What a gentlemanly thing to do. I didn't mean to." "It's fine. I'm not upset. I'm flattered," she said with a smile, and he returned it shyly. "Can I have my hand back?" she asked, smiling in amusement. "Yes," he exclaimed, quickly releasing her fingers and leaning back in his chair. She chuckled and leaned back too. "Are we going to L.A. today?" "No, I still have one more stop before L.A. We'll be in Las Vegas tonight." Sam's face brightened with an excited smile. "I've always wanted to go to Las Vegas." Her big grin made his heart race, and he knew he couldn't imagine being without it. "I have the hotel room booked for 3 days. I hadn't planned on staying in L.A. I don't feel right there, so after my meeting, I will go back to Vegas." He looked into her eyes seriously. "I won't take you to L.A. with me. I hope you will stay in Vegas." "Why? Why can't I go with you?" Sam asked, surprised. "I told you about Lisa and how she is fixated on my other side. She wants to control it," he explained. Sam nodded. "She's been meeting with someone similar to me at her dental office. There's a good chance she will be with him in L.A. She denied it, but I think she was just trying to play with my feelings to make me act in ways I shouldn't." He reached out and took Sam's hand again. "What we didn't consider was meeting you. I discovered what true happiness is. My marriage feels like a sad version of what it should be. It needs to end." "Then just leave! Don't go to L.A., she said, holding on to his hand. He smiled softly. "I need to tell Lisa that she doesn't have my heart anymore. I'm finally free from her. I can do this now because of you." She smiled back, a tear rolling down her face. But then her face changed to worry. "You mentioned this man is like you. How safe will it be to face them together?" "That's the thing. I'm not going to face them. That's what she wants, but I don't care about that anymore. They can be together. I don't feel trapped by her demands anymore. I don't have any feelings for her. I'm going to tell her I want a divorce." Hal felt as light as a feather. The weight he had been carrying suddenly lifted. He could never have said the word divorce before because he was so mixed up in trying to please Lisa. Now he realized how one-sided their relationship had been. Sam's smile was bright and filled with happiness, making Hal want to kiss her hand again. This made her giggle, and the sound filled him with joy, affirming his new direction in life. They left the restaurant with Sam's arm linked with Hal's, and he helped her into the passenger seat. He looked around the parking lot and noticed a dark sedan at the far end. His instincts told him to grab his suitcase, but it was too public for that, and they'd see him. Instead, he got in, fastened his seatbelt, and drove them onto the highway. Soon they were on Interstate 40 heading for Kingman. Sam grinned at him as she took out some CDs from her new purse. He smiled back, and the drive to Kingman was filled with music. Hal stopped for breaks to stretch his legs, and each time he would check for anyone following them, but he could never shake them. This made him think they had a tracker on the car, which surprised him for people like them. It also made him wonder if they were linked to his past, but they weren't very good at hiding, so he found it doubtful. He remembered the handprint on the trunk, thinking it was probably a tracker under the car. He would make a call when they got to Kingman. Sam stayed quiet, understanding he was doing this for a good reason, and he appreciated that. When they exited the highway in Kingman, Hal stopped for gas, and Sam went to the restroom. He looked around and noticed something useful nearby. After paying for the gas, he pulled out his cell phone and dialed a number he had saved. "Report. I think I have someone following me. Is it official?" There was a moment of silence. "No." "Do you need help?" "No, I'm fine. Next question. Chet Barley. Is he official?" Hal had looked up that name. The handler made a startled sound, and his voice became more serious. "No. Stay away. He could be a threat if he contacted you, did he?" Hal considered this. It seemed unlikely that a rogue agent would be involved with his wife. Maybe by accident, but probably not. I met him at the dental office where Lisa works. He kept the LA meeting to himself. This is bad. Stay clear. We'll handle it. Anything else? Hal noticed the man was clearly troubled. He thought some good news might help. I'm going to tell Lisa I want a divorce. What? Why? Is it because of Chet? The handler asked. I thought you'd be pleased, Hal replied, feeling let down. I am. It's just, it's about Sam. The handler's voice changed as he understood the real reason. So you're not happy? Hal asked. I am. Maybe for the first time. No, it's good. We'll talk later. I have to address this other issue. Carl hung up. Hal put away his phone as Sam returned to the car. He handed her some money. Please get some snacks and drinks, water for me. We will skip lunch today, Hal said. Sam nodded and hurried off to the small shop. She came back quickly with the items. Hal let her in the car and then drove to the nearby auto service center. He parked the car in one of the open bays, but a mechanic signaled him to move since they had another customer waiting. Sorry, I drove over something on the highway and I'm worried it might have caused damage. I just need a quick look. There was a thump at the back. It won't take long, he explained, gesturing for Sam to get out. As she did, everyone turned their attention to her. The mechanic called out to another worker under the car. Cliff, come check this out. What's wrong? Cliff asked, frowning. It looks like something odd is stuck underneath, the first mechanic said. Cliff's eyes widened when he looked at Hal's face. Maybe I should take a look, Hal suggested, and Cliff pointed him to the stairs leading to the undercarriage. Hal hurried down to join the mechanic and saw what he was pointing at. It was a tracking device with a limited range. They likely replaced the batteries each night while he slept. He reached up and pulled the device off, and the mechanic yelled in surprise. Hal just looked at the scared man. What are you doing? That could have been dangerous, the younger man shouted. Hal frowned and went back upstairs to find Sam watching him with wide, worried eyes. He smiled at her, and she smiled back immediately, trusting him. Looks like everything is fine, thanks. He nodded to Sam, who picked up her things and got back in the car. Hal handed Cliff a 20 and got in to drive the vehicle out of the bay. The mechanic watched them, looking puzzled. Hal knew they might still be followed, so he drove around the back of the shopping center in the delivery lane and pressed the gas hard. Sam gasped in surprise when he hit the brakes gently to leave the area at a safer speed. He turned right and moved as quickly as he could along the side of the building, rushing through the parking lot to exit south onto the main road, heading back toward the highway. Speeding up again, he caught up to a line of cars heading to the on-ramp for the highway. The light turned green and the cars started to move. Pulling beside a truck carrying a bulldozer, Hal lowered Sam's window and threw a small device out to land on the flatbed. The strong magnet attached itself. Hal quickly switched to the left turn lane and moved away from the truck, which kept driving up the ramp. Hal looked around the road and into his mirrors for signs of the dark sedan. He knew the device wouldn't work for long, but they were now at a junction where he could go west on Interstate 40 to Los Angeles or turn north on Highway 98 to Las Vegas. They wouldn't know which way he would go. Instead of either of those options, Hal drove north through Kingman to take Highway 20 out into the desert. This is the road to Las Vegas? Sam asked. He smiled. The nice route. More time to hear you sing. Sam beamed and started searching for another music disc to play. The miles passed quickly, even though he had taken a longer path. They reached Hoover Dam by mid-afternoon, and Sam was amazed by how big it was. They decided against the tour because Sam wanted to get to Vegas. Hal stayed alert for the dark sedan, but it seemed his trick had worked. It showed how poor they were at following. Sam was filled with energy as they spotted the city. Hal drove past the large hotels to give her a chance to see them. He planned to take her for a walk later to see them up close. As they headed back to their hotel, Sam turned to him with a big smile. This place is incredible. He thought her joy was way more bright than anything this desert city could offer. The Enchant Resort was one of the newer hotels, and Hal had found a good deal for a room. He hadn't realized there was an event happening at the nearby convention center, and some of the hotel's hallways were filled with people attending. Hal parked at the valet desk, handed over the key, and got his ticket before grabbing their bags. What's the event for? Is it something related to adult films? Sam joked. He chuckled and looked for a sign to see who was there. Two tall, attractive women, one blonde and one brunette, wearing long, flowing dresses, walked by and caught everyone's attention. Hal quickly took Sam's arm and gently guided her to the side of the hallway, turning his back to the women. He pulled her in for a warm hug. At first, Sam was surprised, but soon returned the embrace. Hal felt the comfort of the moment, but kept an eye on the brunette until she walked into one of the convention halls. When he pulled back, Sam looked up at him. "What was that for?" she asked, her smile bright. Hal felt a rush of warmth. He didn't want to tell her it was just to avoid trouble with the brunette. Keeping her unaware of the situation was better. Aside from that, he genuinely enjoyed the hug. "I just want to thank you for coming with me, for keeping me calm with your singing, and for helping me think about my life and my marriage. It truly means a lot." "The hug was a lovely start," she replied with a big smile. Hal's attention drifted to a group of men in military uniforms passing by. Behind them were three older men with long hair and beards, arguing passionately in a language he couldn't understand. Following them were four women in business suits chatting and laughing. Hal turned back to Sam, confused. What is this event about? They moved their luggage to the reception desk, and Hal made his way through the crowd to check in while Sam waited. When he returned, she saw that he looked upset. "What's the matter?" she asked. "The room I booked has one king-sized bed, and they're all fully booked, along with most hotels in Vegas." Sam stepped closer, resting against him with her hands on his shoulders. She looked into his eyes, filled with hope. "I wouldn't mind sharing a bed with you." Her words were clear, and he felt a strong attraction. Suddenly she leaned in and kissed him. Her lips were just as sweet and soft as he had imagined, filling him with joy. This woman was everything Lisa wasn't genuine and caring, loving, and she wanted him, flaws and all. His head felt like it might explode with happiness as he enjoyed the moment, but then he thought of Lisa. He pulled back from her lovely smile and took a deep breath. Wait, oh my goodness. "What's wrong? Don't you want this?" "I do," she said, slightly out of breath. Yes, I do," he sighed, and her smile brightened as she leaned in again. He almost gave in, but at the last moment, he gently pushed her back. "I really want this more than anything else, but I need to tell her it's over first. I have to end my marriage before I can start this new chapter. Is that okay?" She leaned her forehead against his. "Yes, I can wait. Just knowing you want me is enough for now." "Let's grab our things upstairs, freshen up, and go find a restaurant for dinner. Then we can take a walk and see the sights. We'll figure out where to sleep later," Hal suggested softly. Sam nodded, her eyes sparkling. They took the elevator to their floor. Hal let Sam open the door with her key. She bounced into the room, admiring the decorations, and rushed over to the window. "Oh, Hal, the view is amazing!" she exclaimed, looking down at the fancy hotels. He enjoyed watching her excitement, and it made him happy. "Yes, it really is." She turned back to him and smiled. "You're making it hard for me not to kiss you." Hal raised his hands with a smile. He checked his suitcase. "I don't have nice clothes for dinner," he sighed, showing her his brown suit. Sam grimaced and he nodded. "I think I'll check the shop in the lobby. Want to join me? Maybe you can find something nice, too." She happily took his arm. They went to the shops next to the lobby. Hal found a dark jacket and pants, a white dress shirt, and black shoes. Sam hit the jackpot with a fitted, stretchy dress covered in gold sequins. It hugged her shape and ended mid-thigh. She wore gold heels that made her shine. She beamed when he told her she looked stunning. He also bought her a small gold purse to match. They decided to change into their new clothes before heading out to dinner. Sam moved her essentials from her backpack to her smaller purse. While she did this, her paperback book slipped from her grasp and tumbled across the floor, with a small, folded paper used as a bookmark flying out. Hal bent down to pick up both items. As he unfolded the paper, he paused to read the notes written on it. He looked at Sam, curious. "Where did you get this paper?" She shrugged. "I lost my old bookmark. There was an old notepad on the table by the phone in Frank's kitchen. I took the top sheet to use as a bookmark." "Why?" He tucked the paper into his pocket and made her a new bookmark using a piece of paper from the pad by the hotel phone. "Does Frank have a good memory?" he asked her gently. She let out a small laugh as she looked at him. "No, he writes notes for himself and leaves them everywhere," she replied, looking at him with interest. He nodded, understanding now why Frank was so eager to find Sam. "Let's go eat." They walked arm in arm back to the elevator and took it down to the lobby again. "You look lovely tonight. Stunning," he told her, enjoying her cheerful smile. "Thank you, kind sir. You look very handsome in the—" Sam's words turned into a scream of fear as a group of men walked by them, suddenly turning and pushing them through double doors into a staffanly area. 8 serious-looking men were trying to pull them away from the public. One of them covered Sam's mouth and lifted her off her feet, dragging her further down the corridor. Her muffled cries still got through. Hal felt a wave of calm as the men approached. He moved quickly, staying ahead of them. He managed to hurt the first man who ran into him, making him loosen his grip. Then he aimed for the next man's eye, causing him to cry out and let go of Hal's jacket. Next, Hal struck the first man again in a sensitive area, taking him down. Hal stepped back to block the way as more men jumped over their fallen friends. These men had knives, but one made the mistake of rushing at Hal. Instead of moving away, he moved forward, dodging the knife just in time. He grabbed the hand with the blade and struck the man's elbow, leaving him unable to hold on. The thug didn't have time to react before Hal took control of the knife. The remaining 2 men hesitated at the sight of their partner falling. Hal stood firm, preventing them from passing, holding the knife he had just taken. The thug holding Sam shifted her position to try to grab a weapon. As soon as Sam's mouth was uncovered, she screamed loudly. He quickly put a hand over her mouth again. Suddenly, the double doors swung open and a big man in a dark suit rushed in. He frowned when he saw the fear on Sam's face and moved toward her. The 2 men in the back of the group made a mistake by trying to grab their weapons. One of them, standing between Sam and the newcomer, ended up on the ground unconscious. He never saw the punch coming. The second man staggered back when something was thrown from the doorway and hit his shoulder. He went down on one knee, and the big man finished him off with a strong blow. The tall, beautiful woman Sam had seen when she arrived at the hotel stepped up beside the big man. She held a knife in each hand and smiled. Sam was amazed by how stunning and fierce she looked. When the man moved his hand behind Sam's back, she realized he might be reaching for a weapon. She tried to glance at Hal, but her captor kept her in front of him. Then Sam heard a strange sound behind her. The man holding her stiffened and then fell to the ground with a quiet groan. Sam stepped forward in surprise, looking back. The man who had grabbed her was on the floor, a knife handle sticking out from the side of his head. She turned to Hal in shock as he got ready to face the last 2 men without weapons. You should be dead!" the tall woman shouted at Hal, but he kept staring at the 2 attackers. The 2 remaining men were unsure whether to fight Hal, who was now unarmed but still threatening, or the fierce woman behind them. Sam felt a gentle touch on her arm and saw the big man signaling for her to leave with him. "I need Hal," Sam said softly. He glanced at Hal. "I don't think he's in any danger now." Then he turned to the tall woman. "Tatiana, don't hurt Hal." "Ben, he's dangerous," she replied sharply. Ben shot her a disapproving look. "And you weren't?" Just then, a blonde woman appeared in the doorway, and she also picked up knives. "Ben, can't you stay out of trouble for 1 minute?" She moved next to the tall woman and quickly assessed the 2 confused men. Sam looked at Ben, then at the 2 strong women standing protectively behind him. Her gaze returned to Ben and she saw the scars on his face. She suddenly remembered the news stories. "You're the man from TV with the art!" she exclaimed. She couldn't believe she was in a hallway with a celebrity known from the news and tabloids, even though the media didn't have the best things to say about him. Her own experience was quite different. Ben glanced at Sam and saw understanding in her eyes. He then looked at the man Sam referred to as Hal. Hal still seemed ready to take on the remaining men and possibly Ben's bodyguards. Turning to Sam, Ben asked, "Can you help Hal calm down?" She nodded in response. "Just a moment," he said. He turned his fierce gaze to the thugs. "I strongly advise you to put down anything you have. Now." Suddenly, another woman in a military uniform jumped into the room and paused at the sight before her. She quickly pulled out two sharp knives. "Ben, stand behind me." "You're late again, Sergeant," Tatiana said with a scoff. Sam watched as the sergeant put her knives away. She moved quickly to the fallen men, carefully disarming them and securing their arms behind their backs, leaving the others who were not alive. Sam stared at the three women and was startled when Ben touched her arm once more. He pointed at Hal, and she nodded back with a shy smile. "Hal, please don't harm these two men," she said, realizing how odd her words sounded. But to her surprise, Hal looked at her and nodded. The two men slowly crouched down, placing their knives on the ground. The sergeant was quick to secure them and take away any weapons in seconds. She looked at Hal, who raised his hands to show he meant no harm. Sam hurried over and wrapped her arms around Hal. He squeezed her tightly, his body shaking from the adrenaline. He kissed her, and she held him closer. "What is happening here?" the sergeant asked. "Ben saved the day again. This time I think he kept these men safe from Hal," Tatiana said, emphasizing Hal's name with a bit of regret. Ben looked at her with concern. "I see you two know each other?" "He hurt someone I was ordered to protect," Tatiana said, clearly upset. She glared at Hal. "I thought I had finished you off." Hal showed her the scar on his palm with a hand over his heart. "Almost." Sam's eyes widened as she realized Tatiana was connected to Hal's scars. Hal turned to Ben. "I need to make a call. I'm Hal Demon, by the way." Ben smiled and replied, "I'm Ben Shepard." Hal took out his phone and called his contact. "Report," came the voice on the line. "I'm in Vegas. I ran into another group associated with the same source as Columbus." The man cursed on the other end. Hal continued after confirming all the men were secured or no longer a threat. "I found out why they are following Sam. I have the important information they want. It needs to go to the FBI right away." Sam stared at Hal in surprise. He nodded at her and smiled gently. There was a pause, then the voice returned with renewed energy. "Really? That's great. Which hotel are you staying at? I'll set up for someone from the agency to collect the information." "The Enchant Resort. They need to hurry because this information is urgent," Hal said. "Got it. What do you need right away?" Hal glanced at the two bodies nearby. He felt a bit of relief thinking about them. "I need help with the police." "No, we will handle that," the sergeant replied. "Who is that?" Carl asked. "Put her on the phone." Hal raised his eyebrows and passed his phone to the woman. She whispered to Carl for a moment before returning the phone to Hal, looking wary. He frowned at her and put the phone back to his ear. "It's me." "They will take care of everything. I'll send the FBI for the information right away." The call ended, and Hal placed his phone back in his pocket, turning to Ben. "Thank you for your help." "Those people didn't seem like FBI or police." "Who were they?" Ben asked. Hal signaled for Sam to come back to him, and she quickly joined his side. "Sam used to be with a bad man. He runs a strip club in Rochester, New York, and he's involved in a human trafficking ring. He wrote about a delivery arriving in New York City on a ship. It's pretty discreet, and will get here in 2 days." Soon after writing the note, Sam escaped from him. She accidentally took the note with her as a bookmark. Now she has been on the run, and this man who forgets a lot is trying to get it back. He can't contact the ship, so all he had was the note, which I now possess. The large man nodded and looked more closely at Hal's arm. "Looks like your jacket got damaged." Hal checked his sleeve and grimaced. "I just bought this," he sighed, then turned to Sam. "Are you still hungry?" She smiled shyly and nodded. Hal grinned at Ben. "Can I treat you and your friends to dinner?" He turned to Tatiana. "As long as you promise not to cause any trouble again." She clicked her tongue but received a stern look from Ben and eventually agreed cautiously. Ben returned Hal's smile. "We have reservations, but we'd love to have you join us if you're interested." Hal noticed the sergeant trying to get Ben's attention. "I'll handle the authorities and meet you upstairs later," the woman said. Police officers were entering the hallway, and she moved to speak with them. As they introduced themselves, they waited for the police to get directions from their leader. Finally, Hal and Sam followed Ben and his bodyguards, Lilia Sokolov and Tatiana Pushkin, to a beautiful restaurant with a stunning waterfall. Hal smiled as he noticed how nervous Sam was next to the two women. He kissed her hand and looked into her eyes, making her giggle nervously. The others watched him with curiosity. A waiter brought the menus and Hal's phone rang. He said, "Excuse me," and stepped towards the entrance to answer. "Hello? Hal Demon?" "Yes, but it's Demon. Who is this?" he replied, frowning a little. "This is Agent Patterson from the FBI. I heard you have something for me. I'm at the front desk." Hal blinked, surprised that someone was there already. "I'll be right there." He made his way to the front desk and quickly saw the agent. She was observing him closely as he approached. "Agent Patterson," he said. "Hal Demon?" she asked, and he nodded. He handed her a piece of paper. "This is a note Frank Capello wrote for himself. The woman I'm with, Sam Dulane, lived with him, and he has not treated her well. She found the courage to leave and took this note as a bookmark for a book she's reading. Mr. Capello has been looking for her since. He has tried to find her twice this week. I learned that he might not remember what the note says. I discovered it tonight, and it seems to show a delivery planned in 2 days." She read the note and nodded, understanding that they needed to act quickly. She carefully placed the paper in her jacket pocket. "Thank you. Can I reach you and Miss Dulane at your number?" she asked. "Yes. She's staying with me," he said firmly. The agent smiled. "Thank you. I'll be in touch." With a nod, she hurried away. Hal watched her leave and returned to the restaurant. He saw Sam looking for him. Her expression of relief made him realize he should have told her what was happening. He promised himself to keep her better informed in the future. He paused at the thought of the future. Just imagining a future with Sam felt like a treasured promise. He moved closer to her and kissed her forehead. She smiled sweetly, a shy but happy look that he loved to see. He took a seat and told the table about his conversation. Sam's smile grew bigger as she understood that one of her difficult choices could help save 30 young women who were in trouble. "Are you here to enjoy the sights or gamble?" Hal asked Ben. Ben shook his head. "The ladies aren't too excited about me walking in crowded places. I tend to draw a lot of attention. I don't gamble either. I'm here for the International Conference on Science, Engineering, and Technology." Hal raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Is that why all these people are here?" Ben smiled and nodded. "I just arrived this morning as the conference is only today and tomorrow. I have some meetings planned, and I'm really excited to attend a few panels." He glanced at his bodyguards, who did not seem very happy. "I told you two that you don't need to join us for the meetings or panels. Evelyn and I will be okay." "But we can't do that, Ben," Lilia replied. "There are military representatives from many countries at this conference." Hal looked back at Ben and noticed his resigned look. The big man managed to smile for Hal and Sam. "It was more enjoyable when I wasn't under so much scrutiny." "Find a way to enjoy it," Hal said, nodding. Ben nodded thoughtfully and smiled again. "So what are you two doing in Vegas?" he asked. Sam shot a nervous glance at Hal, and he held her hand tightly. "I'm heading to Los Angeles for the day tomorrow. I have something important to take care of there." Tatiana's eyes narrowed as she focused on him. "Is this going to end badly?" Ben frowned at her and she tried to hide her reaction. Hal observed their exchange and felt the tension in the air. The reason for it was unclear. "No, that's not why I'm going," he assured them. Tatiana nodded but looked down, accepting his answer. "What about you, Sam?" Ben asked next. Sam still looked a bit uneasy in this group. Her gaze shifted between Hal and Ben. "I'm staying. I'll wait here for Hal. The hotel has a pool, so I might go there. Maybe—" She smiled at the group, and Hal felt her grip tighten on his hand. He placed his other hand over hers and squeezed gently. Her smile showed she appreciated his support. Ben glanced at Hal. "Will Sam have any problems with those guys again?" "No," Hal started to say. But then he remembered the FBI was keeping things quiet until they made their move in 2 days. "Wait!" He turned to Sam, whose eyes were filled with concern. He faced a difficult choice. He couldn't take her with him because Lisa and Chet were dangerous. But leaving her alone while Frank was unaware that she didn't have the information was not safe either. Frank had connections in this city, and it was too risky to walk around Las Vegas tonight with her. He needed to confront Frank Capello soon. "How long will you be in Los Angeles?" Ben asked. "I won't be back until after midnight tomorrow," he answered cautiously. Ben looked at Lilia and Tatiana before turning back to Hal. Sam can join us. She would be safe with us. Hal looked at the two women and noticed they were considering his response. Then he turned to Sam. Would that be okay for you? I'd rather be with you, she started. It's too risky. So you lied, Tatiana snapped, her anger flaring. Stop, Ben growled at her. Hal noticed the mix of emotions on her face. Frustration, desire, fear, need, and confusion all fighting to take over. Usually Hal struggled to read people's feelings. Sam was a good exception for him. Tatiana was skilled at hiding her true intentions. But when she was with Ben, her mask slipped, showing her real emotions clearly, much like Sam did. Hal took a deep breath and held Sam's hands in his. My wife will be there. I'm not sure how she'll react when I tell her I'm filing for divorce, but I think it won't be good for you, and she might even get upset. She doesn't handle losing well. I'm also worried about Chet Barley. I suspect he is trying to target me and is using Lisa as a way to do that. I've heard he's gone off the rails. Ben listened with a concerned look. How are you getting to Los Angeles? Hal looked at him. I'm driving. I don't like flying. Being in a small space with many strangers is tough for me. I was going to offer you a jet service I use. You'd fly alone and it would cut the trip to just an hour each way, Ben suggested. Hal raised his eyebrows in surprise. I have a budget that can't cover. It's on me, Ben insisted. Hal's eyebrows shot up. That's very kind of you. Why? Ben nodded toward Sam, who was looking at Hal with worry. You need to arrive rested to be safe. Please accept Ben's offer, she pleaded. Seeing her concern made him want to keep that look off her face. He turned to Ben. Thank you. I accept. Ben smiled with relief. When do you need to be in Los Angeles, and when would you return? I'd like to arrive by noon. I'd come back here around 9. Ben nodded and pulled out his phone. He spoke softly into it. When he finished, he grinned at them. All set. They'll meet you at the charter counter. Sky Shepherd. You own the jet service? Hal asked, surprised. Ben shook his head. No, it's just a name I let them use for marketing. Dinner arrived, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics like travel and music. Hal proudly talked about Sam's singing talent, which made her blush and led to playful teasing and smiles from her. When Sam asked Ben about his fame, he opened up about how he struggled with it and did his best to overlook it. His passion was engineering, and he loved solving puzzles. They quickly changed the topic and avoided talking about Hal's job. Just before dessert, another couple joined them. The man, Dan Bishop, was a former soldier and, like Ben, had a deep interest in engineering. He was also attending the conference. His wife, Willow, was very beautiful, and Hal noticed right away that she reminded him of Sam. She also seemed to have faced challenges in life. He felt a thought trying to surface, but pushed it aside with a frown. Dan caught his eye, and Hal nodded slightly while taking Sam's hand. Dan was clearly protective of Willow, but accepted Hal's nod as a friendly gesture. After dinner, Ben encouraged Evelyn to come downstairs with them. While they only had coffee, tea, and spring water, they found a small bar where customers could sing on stage, similar to a karaoke show. After some persuasion, they got Sam to sing. Though she started a bit shaky, she gained confidence and finished strong, earning cheers from the audience. They asked her for one more song, and when she returned to their table, she hugged Hal excitedly. I think you found your talent, Ben said to Sam, smiling widely. She loves to sing, and she's amazing, Hal said proudly, receiving a hug and a kiss on the cheek from her. As the night grew late, everyone said their goodbyes with plans to meet for breakfast the next morning. Willow and Sam hugged tightly, having formed a bond in that short time. Hal led Sam into their room, and she went straight to the window to look at the view. Thank you so much for bringing me here, Hal, she sighed, gazing at the lights below. When I get home, I'll have to thank Eve for insisting I give you a ride to Erie, Hal chuckled. Sam turned to him, looking a bit sad. Can we not talk about going home? That place never made me feel as happy as this does. He nodded. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring that up. You're right. Aside from that brief moment when we faced trouble, being here really has been wonderful. Sam laughed softly at his attempt to make things lighter. She moved closer, placing her hands on his shoulders while leaning in slightly. He looked down, then raised an eyebrow, which made her giggle again. She pressed a little harder. I want to show you how much I appreciate you protecting me from those bad people, she said with a sweet pout. I want that too, but we need to wait until tomorrow night, he sighed. Can I kiss you? He leaned forward and their lips met softly, making him lose himself in the moment. When she pulled away, she noticed his dreamy look and smiled, happy to see they both felt good. Hal felt a warm feeling rushing through him and knew he had to stop now, or he might lose control. He wanted to face Lisa tomorrow, feeling he hadn't gone too far. Yes, he had kissed Sam, and they were special kisses. Yet his mind wandered to the times he had caught Lisa with other men, her lipstick on them, and worse things he wished to forget. He understood that Lisa had pushed his buttons to provoke him, trying to control a part of him she could never fully tame. Her need to dominate him was something he could no longer bear. If she kept it up, he might do something he would regret, and that wasn't a path he wanted to take, no matter how manipulative she had been. Lisa didn't see that the part of him she wanted to control couldn't be reasoned with and wasn't capable of feeling empathy. She wouldn't listen to his concerns and would either get angry or cry whenever he tried to talk. He couldn't live like that anymore. He knew he didn't deserve to feel that way and wished for a little happiness in his life now that he had tasted it. Soft hands touched his face, and he was surprised to feel moisture there. Were they tears? He focused back on the moment and saw Sam's kind eyes looking at him. There you are. You seemed lost in thought. Were those thoughts sad? She asked. He loved her hands on his face. No, they're tears of happiness. I'm finally feeling happy after so long. She made a gentle sound, then kissed him softly, and he savored the tender moment. After pulling back, he hugged her tightly. When he let her go, she smiled brightly, her cheeks glowing. He led her to the bathroom and they brushed their teeth together. He then changed into shorts while she finished getting ready. He promised to help her with her hair in the morning. He noticed the large bed in the room and saw the sofa could turn into a bed too. He opened it and found it was quite comfortable. He stood and put away the clothes he had worn today. Could you stay with me until I fall asleep? Sam asked as she walked out of the bathroom. Hal noticed she was wearing his black shirt again. He looked at his laundry and she smiled. He let out a short laugh. She noticed the sofa bed was open and looked at him hopefully. Just for a little while? He smiled and nodded, brightening her face. She hurried to the bed and got under the blankets. He lay down beside her and she cuddled up against his side. He focused on relaxing, running his fingers through her hair, and she seemed to enjoy it. It felt nice to him, too. He reached over and turned off the light, letting the soft glow from the bathroom fill the room. He settled in closer to her. This was what happiness felt like. Hal liked it. He wanted more moments like this in his life. He glanced at Sam in the soft light and noticed she was looking at him. She smiled, and warmth spread in his chest. He marveled at how clear her feelings were to him. Usually he was not great at reading emotions, but hers were easy to see. Her eyes shone with joy just from being close to him. For the first time, he didn't need to prove himself to her. She accepted him without judgment despite his past. She was close, and he felt her excitement. Something inside him urged him to give her a gentle kiss just once before they settled down. He shifted slightly as she gazed up at him, hope shining in her eyes. He leaned in and kissed her softly. Her need for him was clear, and he kissed her back as she melted against him, expressing her happiness. Hal's feelings for her grew stronger, and he ran his fingers through her hair. She gasped, and they shared a tender moment. He adjusted his position, but realized she was tangled in the blankets. In an instant, he jumped up, pulled down the sheets, and climbed back on the bed beside her. Her arms wrapped around him, and she hugged him tightly. They fit together perfectly, and both felt a delightful connection. Sam's hands moved to Hal's back, and she noticed some scars. She pulled back from their kiss to look at him. "Does it hurt when I touch your back?" she asked gently. He saw her worry and shook his head, but then he wondered if the scars bothered her. Her response was to kiss him again and bring her hands around him. She pulled back slightly, surprised. "Oh my God, Hal!" Hal and Sam shared a warm, playful moment together. She laughed, lightly teasing him as they enjoyed each other's closeness, both happy to be together. He smiled, appreciating her enthusiasm and warmth. They shared an affectionate kiss, with her laughter and soft touch filling him with joy. He pulled her close, holding her as they exchanged whispers and quiet laughter, feeling a deep connection in the calm and comfortable space they'd created. Hal's focus remained on her happiness, savoring the simple closeness they shared in that moment. After a while, they settled down, content and relaxed. The two lay together, holding each other in silence, simply enjoying each other's presence as they drifted into sleep, both feeling a sense of peace and togetherness. It felt wonderful to him, but Sam was starting to lose her focus. She wasn't pushing him away, so he became more assertive, and it felt even better. Sam, you feel so good, he said between his movements. She didn't seem able to respond and just held on to him. He thought she might be feeling even better because of the way she was shaking. He was reaching his own limit. She was holding on to him tighter and tighter, and he was moving faster and faster. Sam, I'm almost there. How are you doing? Now! Do it! She shouted, and he was surprised by how loud she was. His body reacted to her command, and he quickened his pace, their bodies coming together until everything around them faded away. My God, Sam! He exclaimed as he felt a rush of warmth. She rested her lips on his neck and trembled quietly. They held on to each other, enjoying the moment and their connection. Hal had never felt anything so deep emotionally. When they finally caught their breath, Hal gently kissed Sam's cheeks, nose, and forehead. She looked up at him, worn out but happy, and smiled softly. What was that for? She asked quietly. Hal struggled to put his feelings into words. It was all new to him, a place he had never been before. He just smiled and shook his head. She laughed lightly, letting her legs slide down to the bed. That sent ripples of pleasure through both of them, and they gasped from the intensity. No more. I'm done for tonight. That was too amazing, she said weakly. He chuckled softly and carefully pulled away from her. She took a quick breath, then relaxed. He shifted to lie next to her, admiring her sweet face. To be honest, he couldn't help but look at her for a moment, enjoying the chance. Eventually, he noticed her breathing slow down. He quietly got up and covered her with a sheet. Not wanting to leave just yet, he lay back down beside her to watch her sleep. Now that he could think clearly, he felt regret for what had happened. He felt like he had lost his ground with Lisa. He had been unfaithful while married. Could he claim he was better than her after what he just did? He thought about it until he realized one important difference. He had a real emotional connection with Sam, while Lisa just used people for her own gain. They meant nothing to her, but he meant nothing to her too. Hal sat in a cozy chair in the lobby of the hotel where Lisa was staying, up the street from the Los Angeles Convention Center. It was a very comfortable chair, and he really didn't feel like getting up. He was feeling very tired. Hours earlier, when he arrived, he looked around the neighborhood for places where Chet might be hiding, but he didn't see any signs of him. Not that he had really expected to. Next, he quietly entered Lisa's room and checked for any signs that Chet had been there. There was nothing. After going back outside, he found a good spot to watch and waited. Eventually, he saw Lisa come back from the convention center. She looked very nice in a pretty red and blue dress that stopped just above her knees. Her high heels made her legs look good, even if they probably weren't comfy. As she walked down the street, he noticed a cheerful bounce in her step as she went towards the hotel. She seemed to be smiling, as if she knew he was there. Maybe she did. Chet had told him when to come, and Lisa. He remembered how she had acted when he first talked to her about Chet. She even left a note about her hotel for him to find. Now, the signs were so clear. Why hadn't he seen it all those years? She had been leading him into another difficult situation. She knew he was in Los Angeles. Lisa got back to the hotel a little after 5 p.m. He almost went after her, but he stopped himself. He wasn't going to confront her. He had told Sam that wasn't his plan, and he was sticking to it. Speaking of Sam, he remembered how he had woken up this morning with her breathing softly against him. He had slept peacefully all night, wrapped in her arms, without waking up in fear or feeling angry. He couldn't remember falling asleep, but it had been a big risk that turned out well this time. Sam had woken up slowly and smiled at him warmly. She had rested well, too. They got ready for the day and went down for breakfast with their new friends. Sam kissed him before he left for the airport, and he saw hope shining in her eyes. After letting Lisa go into the hotel, he settled in the lobby to wait. 6 p.m. came and went without Chet showing up. At 15 minutes after, he took the elevator to her floor again. He entered her room and stopped when he noticed a familiar, unsettling smell blood. He took a careful step forward until he could see the bed clearly. Chet had been there and left. Lisa was still on the bed, her head hanging over the edge. Her arms and legs were spread out and she was not dressed. He could hardly believe what he was seeing, so he felt a dark part of himself emerge to help him cope. She was looking at him with wide, frightened eyes, her mouth open as if to scream, but no sound was coming out. There were cuts on her throat and her body, and it was clear that terrible things had happened. Hal's troubled mind tried to understand the situation, mapping out the grim details of what had taken place. The room was a grim scene, with blood staining the sheets, carpet, and walls, a sign of just how violent the confrontation had been. Chet's anger had fueled the chaos. He wasn't like Hal, after all. Hal heard faint noises from the room next door, a series of thumps and the sound of drawers being opened and slammed shut. Someone was venting their rage. Realization struck him. Chet wasn't on his way to the hotel, he was already here, just next door. Hal turned to his wife, gently closed her eyes and murmured, "I'm sorry I couldn't give you what you wanted, Lisa." He took a steadying breath, allowing his controlled, intense side to surface fully. He approached the door to the adjoining room and considered that it might be unlocked, especially if there had been a relationship between them. Quietly, he slid the door open and stepped through. Chet reacted instantly, raising a large weapon and firing as Hal also squeezed the trigger. Hal felt a powerful impact in his chest, throwing him back down the hall until he crashed into the door. His gun slipped from his hands and he slumped to the floor, struggling for breath. He couldn't see Chet, but he could hear him, muttering with frustration. "You're pretty fast for an old man, Hal." Despite his struggle to breathe, Hal managed to ask, "Lisa?" Chet responded with a sigh. "Didn't plan on it going that far, but she really got to me." He paused. "Why, do this?" Hal panted. "Can't you figure it out?" Chet sneered. "You were the top-ranked agent, and I was always right behind you. I'm not satisfied with being second place. I wanted to be the best." Slowly, Chet came into view, though he was clearly in pain, struggling with a wounded shoulder. His left side was visibly hurt, a mark across his face where Hal's shot had grazed him. It upset his balance. He smiled wildly when he saw Hal against the door, arms by his sides and hands on the floor, with his gun out of reach. He chuckled to himself. Chet leaned forward awkwardly towards Hal. He tried to aim the gun at Hal's head, but his arm shook as he pulled the trigger. A part of the door shattered near Hal's head, prompting him to lean to the side. Hal's other hand lifted from the floor and shot at Chet's knees. Chet fell forward with a loud scream. Hal quickly used his knife. He could see the surprise on the younger man's face. Chet struggled to gather his strength, but it wasn't enough as Hal took the gun from his hand. Hal caught his breath but felt sharp pains in his chest. He might have some broken ribs. He pushed Chet's body aside and looked down at him. He felt a dark urge rise and acted on it. Staring into the dying man's eyes, Hal turned his knife to finish the job. He felt a grim satisfaction seeing fear in Chet's gaze as life slipped away. He wiped the knife on Chet's shirt. Carefully standing up, he pulled out his phone and called his contact. "Report!" "I found Chet," Hal said, trying to breathe. "He's dead," the man replied with a sigh. It wasn't a question. "He killed Lisa because I didn't arrive when she expected. When I got here, he tried to kill me," Hal explained. There was a pause. "Why were you late? You're usually very punctual." The man sounded worried. He didn't like changes in Hal's routine. "I was on time, just not when she thought I would be. I came to talk about a divorce, not confront her about anything else. I never expected he would hurt her." Hal felt lightheaded, having trouble breathing. He might have internal injuries. He told Carl the hotel name, the floor, and the room numbers, then ended the call. He walked down the hall and picked up his other gun. He reloaded both weapons and tucked them into hidden pockets on his pants. He looked through Chet's luggage and took a shirt and a hoodie. He changed out of his torn shirt and the 2 protective vests he wore. The extra layers had saved him, but the impact from the bullet still hurt his ribs. Chet's shirt was a bit loose and the hoodie was bulky, but at least he wasn't covered in blood anymore. He left the room and headed to the lobby. As he rode the elevator down, his breathing grew shallower. He was in trouble. As he walked through the lobby, his mind was filled with the bright smile of a lovely woman. He longed to see that smile just one more time. That's when his handler found him, sitting in a chair, struggling to breathe. Sam hurried through the hospital halls, her heart racing. She couldn't focus on anything but what was ahead of her, and the pounding of her heart drowned out everything else. When Hal missed his flight home, the pilot called Ben to see if he should wait. That's when panic set in. Hal had been shot. That was all Sergeant Kilcade managed to learn from the person Hal always called. Upon hearing this, the sergeant mobilized the resources of the U.S. Army to find out which hospital Hal had been taken to. They said goodbye to Dan and Willow, and then Ben arranged a private jet to fly them all from Las Vegas to Los Angeles. She was amazed by his kindness, but his 2 bodyguards simply told her that Ben promised to help her until Hal returned. He took his promises seriously. They had a police escort to the hospital, though even Ben didn't know where that came from. Still, she felt thankful. They met the man on the phone named Carl, who told them Hal was still in surgery. He had been wearing a vest, so the bullet didn't penetrate too deeply, but it was a large bullet that broke some ribs and caused some damage. It was critical. That morning, she woke up in the waiting room, resting against Ben's shoulder. He woke her to share that someone had finally come to tell them Hal had been moved to a recovery room earlier that night. He provided the room number, and she hurried to find him. When she finally found the right room, she rushed inside and saw Hal resting against pillows. She stopped herself from jumping into his arms, and instead stepped closer to the bed and brushed his hair back gently. He had a tube delivering air to him. Her touch seemed to wake him up, and his eyes slowly opened. She remembered his rule. "Hal, it's Sam. How are you doing?" "I've felt better," he replied while taking a breath. "I've felt worse." His gaze wandered around the room. "Where am I?" "A hospital in Los Angeles. Can you tell me what happened?" she asked. He closed his eyes for a moment. "I probably shouldn't," he said. Then his eyes opened again. "But I can share a little. The man my wife chose to be with took her life. He's the one who shot me." Sam gasped, her hands flying to her mouth in surprise. She felt a mix of horror and unexpected relief, and then guilt washed over her for feeling a spark of joy. She must have shown her feelings because Hal smiled softly at her. "It's okay," he said gently. "I completely understand. I went there to tell Lisa I was ready to end our marriage, but I guess that fight won't happen now. I'm free, as strange as it may sound. I feel sad about her death and the way it happened, but I couldn't control any of it. Understanding this makes me see my whole marriage in a different light. She didn't love me. She loved being in charge of me and the chaos I kept hidden inside. That was what she wanted most." "I'm sorry," Sam said quietly. He shook his head slightly. "You've been very honest with me. I really appreciate that. It means a lot, especially since I have to keep many secrets for others. You make me so happy. I never imagined I could feel this much joy. I don't think I deserve it, but I cherish it, and you." Sam's big, bright eyes were filled with tears. "Those aren't sad tears, are they?" he asked, looking worried. "No, you silly man. I'm just really happy, too," she replied excitedly. "Then why aren't you kissing me?" She laughed and leaned over to kiss him, gently holding his face. In the hallway, Ben peeked in and then turned away from the open door. He looked down at the small man beside him. Their eyes met. "You're taking over their protection duty until the issue with her ex is cleared up, right?" Carl nodded. "Good. Now I need to say my goodbyes." He knocked on the door frame and entered with a smile. "Hi. I hope I'm not interrupting, but I'm going back to my own life and I wanted to wish you goodbye and good luck," he said warmly. Sam turned and gave him a strong hug, which Ben returned. Then he shook Hal's hand. "You two take care of each other, okay?" "Thank you for looking after Sam," Hal said. Ben smiled. "It was my pleasure. Get better soon." With a final wave, the big man left, joining his 3 friends in the hall to head home. Carl came in looking serious. "You worried us a bit there." Hal shrugged with a small smile. "The doctor says you can leave in a week. I think you've had enough traveling for now. We'll fly you back to Rochester." "I'm not going back. Chet was on the West Coast, right? San Diego? I want his area. I need a new home for Sam and me. Sam squealed in delight, looking back and forth between the two men. Carl sighed, but knew he had to keep them happy, especially since he'd just lost their next best agent, the one who had gone rogue. He also found and dealt with Hal because of the program's weak security. Carl nodded, enduring Sam's enthusiastic hug. He struggled to regain his composure and nodded at the couple. I'll start making the arrangements. Once Sam and Hal were alone again, he looked at her seriously. I hope I wasn't assuming too much when I said you'd— No, of course I want to be with you, she exclaimed. He steeled himself, knowing he needed to be honest. My other side is permanent. I can't change that. We're meant to be together, he said with some hesitation. I see. I can't say I will ever fully accept that part of you, but I love you and want to be with you forever, Sam said with warmth in her voice. He smiled, feeling a wave of relief and happiness wash over him. It was a feeling he planned to hold on to. He wanted to make this woman his wife and get it right this time. This relationship would be built on love, not controlling behavior. I love you too. Hal watched Sam's radiant smile light up her face, and he felt the joy of true happiness fill him again. He would do whatever it took to keep that smile bright. That was his new purpose. Epilogue. Frank Capello entered his hotel room in Positano, Italy. He was a large man, but the journey to get there had tired him out. He dropped his suitcase on the bed. Everything he owned and his remaining money were in that one small case. Exhausted, he walked to the double doors of the Juliet balcony and leaned on the railing to take in the beauty of the village below him. A gentle breeze helped cool the sweat on his face. His thoughts whirled as he reflected on how quickly his life had changed. Just 6 weeks ago, he was a top distributor for a criminal operation in the U.S. and Mexico. Now he had nothing but the cash in his suitcase. $1.5 million wasn't enough to restart his old business. He blamed that troublesome blonde woman for his downfall. He had to pull many strings to free himself from the mess his business had become. When the authorities seized the ship, caught the smugglers, and rescued the group he was supposed to collect, they turned their attention to him. He had no choice but to leave everything behind and escape. Now he would have to begin again. He still had some connections who wanted to help him, so once he built a new base with their assistance, he could start earning again. Once he found some stability, he would deal with his unfinished issues with Sam. He allowed himself a small smile. Then he sensed someone behind him, and before he could turn around, he felt something sharp at his neck. He froze. The discomfort was intense, and he leaned forward slightly, trying to relieve the pressure. He quickly realized that movement only made things worse, so he stood still. "What do you want?" Frank managed to say, trying to stay calm. The discomfort grew stronger as he wondered which of his enemies had found him. He thought he had planned his escape perfectly. The man behind Frank seemed very skilled. "What do I want?" Frank felt a strong fear when he heard the quiet, emotionless voice behind him. Nothing. Panic took over Frank. He looked down and saw how far he could fall, realizing it could be fatal if the knife didn't end his life first. "Look! You can take the money in the suitcase! Please don't hurt me!" He started to breathe heavily from fear as the knife pressed a bit harder against him. "He said I could have you. For Sam." Frank's heart raced as he heard that name. Sam? She sent this person after him? Memories flooded his mind of all the hurtful things he had done to Sam. The weight of his past actions hit him hard as he realized he was in serious danger. With a swift movement, the knife pierced his neck, leaving him weak. Frank couldn't cry out as he collapsed forward over the railing, falling 30 feet to the ground below. A passing bus happened to drive over him as he fell. When the tourists from China rushed off the bus, some paused to take photos. A few pointed their cameras at the open balcony, but there was nothing to see, just curtains blowing gently in the wind. Inside, the room was quiet and empty, except for an open suitcase on the bed where an unusual assortment of items lay scattered. The police would certainly find this case puzzling. Sam felt a wonderful tingling sensation throughout her body. It was as if her skin was glowing. She had just spent the day at a beautiful spa, enjoying every moment of relaxation. First, she had a full body massage that melted away all her tension. Then came a facial, making her feel younger and refreshed. Next, she had her nails done, sporting a lovely shade of pink with sparkles. Afterward, they washed and trimmed her hair just a bit because Hal preferred it long. As an extra treat, she had a wax treatment, leaving her feeling smooth and ready for Hal's return. The entire day felt like a dream, something she had always wished for but never thought would actually happen. She certainly never expected to enjoy this luxury at a high-end spa in Positano, Italy. So far, Italy was stunning, and it was the first stamp in her new passport. Sam had been by Hal's side, caring for him as he recovered from his injuries back in Los Angeles. He healed very quickly, and they spent their recovery time at a nice hotel while Hal's helper, Carl, prepared their new life on the West Coast. Hal surprised her with a passport, arranged by Carl, and first-class tickets for a flight to Naples, Italy. Hal seemed excited to get there and wasted no time driving a rental car to the beautiful village of Positano. Then he checked them into a lovely hotel. After a delightful dinner on a patio overlooking the sea, they collapsed onto their bed, too tired for much else but hugging. She felt amazed by how fast everything was happening. Hal promised they would take things slower the next day. This morning, he surprised her again with a spa reservation just for her, explaining that he didn't like strangers touching him. She had a wonderful day and couldn't wait to get back to their room to see Hal. The thought of him brought a warm feeling to her. Hal was such a refreshing change from Frank. Remembering her old boyfriend made her uneasy, so she pushed those thoughts away and focused on Hal, how he made her feel, and how much she enjoyed making him happy. She felt a little giddy just thinking about him. Sam rushed down the last hallway to their suite and used her keycard to enter. She walked into the open living area and saw Hal relaxing on a lounge chair on their balcony. When he turned to smile at her, she felt a flutter inside and her legs shook a little. He stood and watched her come closer with a big smile. "Hello, beautiful." She jumped into his arms and gave him a soft kiss. When the kiss ended, he grinned and invited her to sit next to him on the chair. "Did you enjoy your spa day?" he asked. "It was amazing in every way," she replied happily. "Great. You deserve to be treated well," he said, gently lifting her hand to kiss it. After a kiss that made her feel all warm inside, he admired her nails. "They look lovely." "Thank you," she said with a smile. He raised an eyebrow as he looked at her hand more closely. His expression changed, showing he was a bit troubled. Sam noticed this and felt worried. "It's almost perfect, but there's one thing missing," he said with a playful sigh. Sam tried to guess what he meant, feeling anxious to be perfect for him. "Ah, I know," he suddenly said cheerfully. Still holding her hand, he reached under the pillow behind him. When he turned back, he knelt down in front of her. In his left hand was a small black leather box. Sam felt a little dizzy as she watched him open the box, revealing a stunning ring. It had a large, clear diamond in the center, with smaller diamonds curved around it like stars in the sky. She couldn't breathe, it was so beautiful, and that center diamond was huge. "I need you, Sam. I can't imagine my life without you. You bring meaning and balance to my days, and those are important for my happiness. I promise to always do my best to keep you happy and safe as we grow old together. Will you marry me?" She was speechless as she looked into Hal's hopeful eyes. She quickly nodded and a big, relieved smile spread across his face. He took the ring from the box and gently placed it on her finger, which surprisingly had no other rings. It fit perfectly. "Oh my gosh, Hal," she exclaimed, staring at the beautiful diamonds on her finger. She had never owned a diamond before, not even a small one. Her whole body was shaking, so he sat next to her and wrapped his arms around her in a warm hug. "I love you so much," she cried. "I love you too," he replied. After she calmed down, she rested her head against him and gazed in amazement at the ring. "When did you have time to get this?" she asked, still in shock. He shrugged lightly. "While you were at the spa, I took a walk and did some shopping." She couldn't believe how big the main stone was. "Is it really real?" Hal chuckled. "Yes, I made sure all the diamonds are real, and the center one is 10 carats. I wouldn't spend that much money on a fake ring." Sam gasped at the price and pulled back to look at him in surprise. Hal instantly felt awkward. "Oops, that was a bit much, wasn't it? I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry." She continued to stare wide-eyed. Hal, you shouldn't spend that much on me. Don't worry about it, of course I should. Didn't you hear me say how much I need and love you? You mean more to me than any amount of money. I hope you like the design. I just asked them to show me the prettiest ring. He looked down at her hand and smiled. I think it looks beautiful on you. Sam pulled him close and kissed him again and again, smiling widely with tears in her eyes. When she pulled back, she quickly removed the costume jewelry from her other fingers to give the new ring some space. She kept her favorite rings on her index finger and thumb. She looked up at Hal. The new ring needed a little room. The others were too close. Maybe we could get some earrings to match, Hal suggested, grinning as her eyes lit up. She shook her head. Wait! I can't let you spend your savings on me like this. He smiled and shook his head. I'm not using my savings. I recently got some money that I can use for good things. Now it can help to make you happy. I want to see you smile. She playfully pushed him down on the lounge chair, leaning over him. You don't need to spend money to make me happy. I have plenty of ideas that can do that, she said, giving him a teasing look. She loved seeing the way he reacted to her. She felt excited about the happiness they would share together. Sam was also looking forward to making him happy for many more days to come. Hey everyone! Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the exciting stories we have coming up. What do you think about the characters in this story? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.